I'm truly not sad anymore. I thought of a group of people, and I wanted to kill them, so I began to meticulously plan. I took a long detour, leaving Luocheng through the towering mountains, and bought an old donkey in a turbulent little town. I rode my donkey towards Luocheng, disguising myself as a destitute old woman along the way. My disguise technique was extremely refined, usually used to conceal my appearance, now employed to forge an identity. Luocheng had loose entry but strict exit policies. With many refugees settling there, I poisoned my own throat to mute my voice, adopting a hoarse and unpleasant tone while riding a scrawny donkey. I settled among the refugee camps outside Luocheng, claiming to be a displaced person from another region, then used my remaining silver to exchange for an abandoned cottage in a nearby village. I dutifully played the role of an old woman there for some time. Once the locals became familiar with me as a pitiful refugee, I passed by the large military camp outside Luocheng, observed the laborers inside, and secretly sought out the supervising minor official. I deliberately prepared a lavish feast to entertain him. The petty official reveled in flattery, after which I produced a cloth bundle and unwrapped it layer by layer, revealing some aged gold and silver jewelry inside. I forced an ingratiating smile and begged to use these items to buy a younger laborer from him. I said my family back home used to be fairly well off, so I had some savings. But with the continuous wars and unrest in recent years, my husband, sons, daughters-in-law, grandsons, and granddaughters all died, leaving only me to flee to Luocheng for refuge. I wanted to adopt a grandson to continue the family line and have someone to care for me in old age. Ordinary able-bodied men wouldn't be willing to look after an old woman like me, so I had to find another way by buying a lowly laborer. The petty official was clearly not new to taking such bribes. His greasy face broke into a smile as he said he was kind-hearted and would consider it a good deed, while deftly pocketing the money. True to his word, he sold 15 to me. Among the group, 15 was relatively young, somewhat disobedient, and prone to causing trouble. I took 15 with me, then used the remaining money to bribe a passerby, having them tear off the notice on the city gate to report that petty official. 26. Last time after I killed the prefect's son, I casually took the golden picio he was wearing, but didn't strip him of all valuables. This made the prefect suspect it was a murder for robbery, yet without evidence, so he had the golden ornament sketched and posted notices at the city gates, offering rewards for informants. Upon receiving the tip, the prefect immediately led men to search the petty official's home that very night. Sure enough, beneath some old gold and silver jewelry, they found that rather inconspicuous golden picio. The prefect's eyes blazed with fury as he demanded whether this man had murdered his son. The terrified petty official didn't even bother hiding his corruption in taking bribes for labor conscription anymore, admitting an old woman had given it to him as payment. But when they arrived, they found the old woman had already died from poisoning. It seemed someone wanted to silence her permanently. No one would doubt the old woman's identity. The locals all knew she was a refugee. Now the minor official had no way to defend himself, especially since he had a motive. He once had a childhood sweetheart who was forcibly taken as a concubine by the prefect's son. In the previous life, Gulu's jade token ended up in this group's hands precisely because the prefect's son disdained it and casually gifted it to his concubine, who then passed it to her former lover. Now everyone suspected the minor official harbored resentment over the forced marriage and was deliberately seeking revenge. Suspicion fell on a group conspiracy. The official overseeing the laborers, along with his usual drinking buddies, were all thrown to the front lines as bait by the furious prefect. No one knew that the 80-year-old woman who had died from poisoning me had crawled back out from the mass graves outside the city. The fake death potion I personally concocted. This is the first time using it, with myself as the test subject. I quietly returned to the old woman's hut, changed back to my original appearance, then set fire to the clothes, wigs, and the entire house to destroy all traces. After reviving the hidden 15 with the antidote, I brought him back to my thatched cottage. Gulu, look who I brought back. Hearing this name, 15, whose head was still covered, trembled all over. After calling out repeatedly with no response, I opened every door one by one. Gulu wasn't there. Just as I was wondering where he had gone, I saw Gulu walking back with a blood-stained axe in hand. The moment he returned, he grabbed me and scrutinized me repeatedly, making sure I wasn't injured. His voice trembled slightly. Could you please not disappear without a word again? Only then did I notice the tail following me. One of the minor official's drinking buddies, after escaping. He had been lurking near the old lady's house, thinking it was the safest spot where no one would think to search. When he spotted me, he trailed behind until Gulu, who was out, noticed and dealt with him. Truthfully, I didn't vanish without a word. I had made an excuse to leave. I told my mother I was traveling with merchants for a few months to sell her embroidery at a better price. She believed me, but Gulu clearly wasn't fooled. The moment he returned, he realized I was gone and had been searching everywhere for me since. Guilty, I avoided answering and pushed 15 forward instead. Look who I brought back. Untying the rope binding Sherwoo and removing the blindfold, the two stared at each other in stunned silence. Border unrest was escalating at this time, with frequent outbreaks of warfare, making Luoqing increasingly unstable. Not long after, I heard that group met a gruesome end, used as bait on the front lines. Hacked apart by chaotic troops and trampled under hooves. In her past life, Gulu had also avenged Sherwoo, embarking westward to slaughter countless, but in this lifetime, I will be the one to carry out these bloody deeds. His most loyal subordinates will not die tragically again, nor will he need to have blood on his hands once more. 27. The war reached Luoqing, and everyone sought ways to flee. Those who were openly or secretly monitoring Gulu were too preoccupied with their own survival to keep tabs on him. Just like in the previous life, Gulu secretly contacted his scattered loyal former subordinates, planning to escape the city amidst the chaos. The difference this time was that 15 and I were added to the plan. I left plenty of firewood and provisions in the thatched cottage, gave her all the money I had saved, and told my mother I was going on another long journey with the traveling merchants. After a long while, my mother still ignored me, so I had no choice but to leave quietly on my own. The old Ateo would have been deeply disappointed, but now I no longer obsess over whether others show me even a shred of familial affection. I don't know when it started, but Gulu began trusting me completely. He pretends to be half-witted in front of others, but with me, he's always been his true self. Now he doesn't even bother hiding his cards, showing me everything openly, including his old followers, the people he's recently bought and tamed, and the full extent of his current influence. Even though I knew Gulu somewhat, I was still astonished to learn about his numerous hidden cards. His enemies haven't yet realized that Gulu is not to be underestimated. No wonder in his previous life, despite holding a terrible hand, he still managed to fight his way back to the imperial capital. Thinking about it, Gulu once had a grand tutor who served 3 dynasties, learned from renowned scholars across the land, and was trained by the military Yi family, mastering both literary and martial arts. Growing up in the treacherous depths of the palace, he secured the crown prince's position at a very young age, earning the admiration of officials and commoners alike. His strategic prowess is evident, following Gulu as we avoided official roads and traversed mountains. I knew he was about to encounter one of the people he hated most in his past life, that hypocritical miracle doctor. I had no intention of preventing their encounter, quietly following behind. 28. Climbing up a small hill, next to it was a steep cliff. Below lay a desolate path rarely traveled. The mountain was densely wooded, concealing our group's presence. The main road below now frequently saw fleeing carriages and horses, along with remnants left by pursuing bandits. On the way, we indeed encountered an old man who had fled to the mountain after running into bandits. Now pinned to a tree trunk by a stray arrow, he begged us for help, barely clinging to life. In this lifetime, Gulu appeared much kinder, seeing it was an elderly man, and recognizing him as the renowned miracle doctor known far and wide, he didn't hesitate to offer help. Yet I stopped him, stepping before the so-called miracle doctor and dropping a single line, "Take me as your disciple, and I'll save you." Gulu didn't understand my intention, but he showed no confusion either. Seamlessly shifting the conversation, he added in a calm voice, "Think carefully, if you miss us, you likely won't find anyone else who can help." The miracle doctor's expression darkened, but he agreed nonetheless. 15 pulled the arrow from his body, applied the scarce medicine they had, bandaged his wound to stop the bleeding, and carried him to find shelter for the night. The old man expressed his gratitude, but secretly slipped a sedative into the soup boiling over the fire. Having taken the antidote beforehand, he watched as his group of saviors drank the spiked brew. To his surprise, everyone remained unharmed while he alone collapsed, his bones racked with such pain that he writhed on the ground. As I watched him howl and roll in agony, I leisurely finished my grilled fish, wiped my hands clean, then slowly crouched beside him. My esteemed miracle doctor, aren't you eating? Not hungry? Too weak to even glare, the old man crawled to my feet, kowtowing and pleading, give me the antidote." It seems he also knew he was poisoned and that he couldn't cure himself. I had someone secretly discard the pot of soup he spiked with drugs behind his back, leaving only one bowl for him to drink, to which I added something extra. The mixture of various drug properties turned it into a deadly poison. Gulu and the others cooperated with me, pretending not to notice his little scheme. I laughed. So even the renowned divine physician has moments when he can't heal himself. I pulled out the prepared antidote and tossed it to him. This can suppress the toxicity, of course. It only treats the symptoms, not the root cause. You'll still have episodes from time to time, each more painful than the last. Without relief, you'll suffer excruciating pain until death. I can prepare medicine to ease your symptoms periodically, but you must obey me properly. I said with a hint of teasing, my tone meaningful. My dear master. He wolfed down the pill, and before fully recovering, he anxiously examined the residual powder in his hand, rubbing, sniffing, and tasting it. When he looked at me, his eyes were filled with shock, completely forgetting my earlier threat as he exclaimed in amazement, "Little girl, did you prepare this antidote yourself?" He was genuinely skilled, so he could immediately tell that my medical expertise was no less than his. Beyond surprise, his expression suddenly softened regarding the matter of being forced to acknowledge me as his disciple not long ago. I don't care what he thinks, I only know that my goal has been achieved. In her past life, Gulu suffered greatly at his hands and missed the last chance to see her mother. Of course I wouldn't let him die too easily. This poison's effects will become increasingly frequent, making life worse than death. At the same time, I can use this to control him for my purposes. In her past life, Gulu personally taught me how to play chess. During a game, even the most insignificant piece can play a major role. 29. Gulu's identity is special, and the journey to the capital involves numerous checkpoints where it's highly likely the palace officials would learn he has left Luo City. Now with this so-called miracle doctor, everything becomes much simpler. The miracle doctor's reputation is widespread. Let him arrange the carriages and handle the checkpoints while we disguise ourselves as his disciples or servants. No one would associate us with the deposed crown prince. This is one of his functions. After resting overnight, we prepared to descend the mountain and happened to encounter the governor of Luoqing fleeing in panic with a large entourage, pursued by a troop of soldiers. It seems Luoqing has already fallen. These incompetent officials abandoned the city's residents and fled. With enemy forces chasing them all the way here, no one noticed us hidden behind the bushes. Watching that group, I took out the arrow I had pulled out yesterday. Along the way, I collected many stray arrows scattered in the woods and had Gulu make a simple bow. Now they came in handy. I took aim at the plump, big-eared prefect leading the group and killed him with a single arrow, then, one arrow after another. I shot down each person who had oppressed Gulu in Luoqing under Consort Sun's orders. The scene was chaotic. No one noticed the direction the arrows came from, assuming they were shot by pursuing soldiers behind them. Even if someone realized something was amiss and pulled out the arrows to identify their origin, the blame would only fall on others. After all, those arrows were picked up from elsewhere. Gulu could tell I was avenging him. He didn't interfere, patiently waiting as I took my shots. Only when a stray arrow whizzed toward us did he gently pull my arm to steer me out of harm's way. By this time, all the people I wanted to deal with below were already dead. He pulled the arrow embedded in the tree trunk, took the crude curved bow, drew the string, and with one shot brought down the enemy leader from his horse. Chaos erupted between the two sides below. Gulu said gently, "Let's go." Under the pretense of a northern medical tour, we brought the divine physician with us and entered the capital, settling in an inconspicuous mansion in the bustling market district. The divine physician was extremely wealthy, so I had him purchase all the surrounding mansions as well to prevent prying eyes and neighbors from growing suspicious. Next, we needed to find a way for Gulu to legitimately stay in the capital. I told Gulu that his mother was actually still alive, imprisoned in a manor outside the city. Gulu stiffened completely, his eyes slightly reddened when he looked up, but he remained silent. After a long pause, he patted my head and sighed knowingly, somewhat helplessly. Instead of immediately asking about his mother, he inquired, "Tao, are you thinking of doing something dangerous alone again?" He reads people so accurately. Last time I left without a word, making Gulu worry. And I felt guilty too, so this time, I decided to clearly tell him what I planned to do. I'm going to make his mother die. Gulu didn't say it was bad, so I began to take action. I found that manor, an unassuming estate with extremely tight security, making it difficult for outsiders to approach. I observed the place for some time, then concocted some strange medicines and sprinkled them into the spring they drew water from. Before long, the guards and servants in the manor began experiencing mental confusion and hallucinations. I also wandered around in white robes late at night a few times, and soon rumors spread that the manor was haunted. The effects of the drugs convinced them the rumors were true. The maids and servants inside sought ways to transfer out, leaving many positions vacant. As I expected, the manor, now short-handed, turned to a matchmaker to buy new workers. I disguised myself as an ordinary person. Pretending to be an orphan girl fleeing from disaster, I was picked up by a matchmaker, and when I mentioned that I knew a few characters, she thought I could fetch a good price. She fabricated an identity for me and sent me to the estate for the steward to choose. A literate maid was a significant advantage, and as expected, I was selected and assigned to the main courtyard, the residence of the deposed Empress Shi. I met Empress Shi, whom I had never seen in my previous life. She was extraordinarily beautiful, spending her days sitting on a swing in a daze. I also encountered Emperor Qi Min, whom I had never met before. In my past life, Gu Lu's father was posthumously honored as Min, but now he was still the Emperor of Qi. The Emperor visited frequently, yet was constantly at odds with Empress Shi. Their meetings were filled with endless arguments and mutual loathing. As an inconspicuous maid, I bided my time until finding an opportunity to meet Empress Shi alone. I brought the jade token she had left for Gu Lu, proving my acquaintance with him. Upon seeing the object, Empress Shi became visibly agitated before quickly composing herself, her piercing eyes fixed on me as she awaited my explanation. I beat around the bush, not rushing to tell her what I intended to do. I stayed at the manor for a while longer, gradually gaining her trust before finally presenting the fake death pill. I told her she could feign death to leave this place, and that Gu Lu was waiting for her outside. I wouldn't risk Gu Lu's mother's safety, so I personally tested this fake death pill. It has no side effects. The plan went smoothly. Empress Shi pretended to fall ill, and before the imperial physician could arrive, she breathed her last. Upon hearing the news, the emperor rushed over overnight, held her lifeless body and wept until dawn before reluctantly placing her in the coffin. Before the coffin was sealed, I stole her away and vanished into the night. Gu Lu would erase all traces of our departure. Back at the small residence, Empress Shi clung tightly to Gu Lu. The seemingly strong woman wept until her eyes turned red. After calming her emotions, Gu Lu escorted her back to her room, then turned his gaze toward me. I sat on the small bridge in the courtyard, idly swinging my feet to tease the fish in the water while casually catching the stream flowing from the rockery. Slowly, I washed away the yellowish-brown makeup on my face, revealing my clean features. I've made up for Gu Lu's greatest regret from my past life, so I'm unusually happy now. Turning my head, I noticed Gu Lu staring at me. I beamed with a radiant smile. 30. After Empress Shi died, the emperor suddenly became despondent, depressed and neglecting state affairs. Not even his beloved consort's son could persuade him. He also began suffering from insomnia, lying awake night after night. When he finally managed to fall asleep, closing his eyes only brought dreams filled with images of his deceased wife. All the imperial physicians had examined his pulse, yet none could cure his insomnia. They had no choice but to post notices seeking skilled doctors among the common folk. Coincidentally, the renowned miracle-working physician was in the capital at the time, so the palace naturally sent for him. The miracle doctor brought me, his disciple, into the palace and wrote a prescription for the emperor. That night, the emperor finally enjoyed a good night's sleep. However, this prescription didn't address the root cause and only provided temporary relief. The miracle doctor announced he needed to travel south to gather better herbs, leaving me behind in the palace to tend to the emperor's health. I stepped forward from between the two young attendants behind him, and as I raised my head, the surroundings fell silent. I know I was born beautiful, and dressed in simple white robes, with a face like a lotus emerging from clear water. I must have looked utterly harmless, effortlessly winning the favor and trust of those around me. Who would have thought that the emperor's current nightmares were actually my doing? He had visited the estate several times before, and I had administered a slow-acting poison, not lethal, but quite troublesome. I naturally stayed in the palace, occasionally worsening the emperor's symptoms, then brewing medicine to provide temporary relief for a day or two. In his dazed state, he kept recalling the late Empress Shi, and as I occasionally feigned innocence while mentioning matters related to her, the emperor gradually grew more remorseful and regretful, similar to my previous life, except now I've accelerated the process. While the emperor was reminiscing over objects and drowning in regret, I casually brought up Gu Lu. I said, "Your subject's daughter was born in Luoqing. Once, I rescued a dying man from among the beggars. He was ragged, limping, disheveled, and filthy, often forced to crawl on all fours like a dog to beg for food, the fool whom everyone in the city despised. Later, when Luoqing fell into turmoil, I left with my master and never saw him again, nor do I know if he's still alive." I mentioned it casually, as if it were of no importance, without revealing who that person was. Some time later, the emperor went out to relax and encountered an ambush by assassins. Fleeing alone to a desolate place, on the verge of fainting from hunger, he met a disheveled, filthy man with unkempt hair. The man's disheveled hair obscured his face, making his features indistinguishable, and his behavior appeared somewhat foolish. Though simple-minded, he was kind-hearted. Seeing the half-fainting emperor, he gave him the last half-piece of cake he had. The emperor had probably never eaten such a hard cake in his life, but he devoured it quickly and was deeply moved. Just as he was about to speak, the assassins who had been pursuing him arrived. In the ensuing chaos, the man unexpectedly took a sword thrust meant for the emperor. At that moment, the scattered imperial guards finally arrived. The two sides clashed, and all the assassins were slain. I am now the physician most trusted by the emperor. When the entourage returned to the palace, I rushed over urgently upon receiving the news. After treating both their wounds, I was astonished to recognize this filthy individual. I told the emperor that this was precisely the poor wretch I had saved in Luoqing. His head had suffered a severe blow in the past, affecting his mental faculties, which made him appear somewhat simple-minded. I mentioned how unexpected it was to encounter him again in such a distant place, and that he seemed to have lost his memory. As I casually wrung out a cloth to wipe his face clean and combed his disheveled hair, the emperor glanced over absent-mindedly, then the medicine bowl in his hand fell to the ground with a clatter. Gulu feigned ignorance flawlessly, startled by the crisp, sharp sound, instinctively shrinking back to hide. He was also exceptionally handsome, the innocent clear eyes of a beautiful person, filled with panic and wariness, looked utterly pitiful. That day, the emperor, dragging his ailing body, staggered over and pulled Gulu up. Some things are best left unsaid. As the most trusted and skilled physician in the palace, if I say Gulu is mentally impaired, then he is mentally impaired. If I say he has amnesia, then he has amnesia. Even if other imperial physicians diagnose different results, they wouldn't dare speak up. To say otherwise would be admitting their skills are inferior. How could they fail to recognize symptoms that others can diagnose? Being both mentally impaired and suffering from amnesia, his appearance in the outskirts of the capital 1,000 miles away becomes understandable. Perhaps during the chaos of war, in his confused state, he wandered here with the flow of refugees. Even with mental impairment, he remains kind-hearted, willing to give his only food to someone on the verge of starvation. Even with amnesia, he remains filial, instinctively shielding his father when blades came thrusting toward them. In stark contrast to his kind and filial nature was his disheveled and wretched appearance, along with my casual remark about how a severe blow had affected his mental state. After all, Gulu was still a prince, even after being demoted to commoner status and exiled, as someone of royal blood. He should have maintained some dignity. He shouldn't have ended up in such a state. The emperor sent people to investigate what had happened to him during this period. They discovered that Gulu had suffered torment ever since leaving the capital, and of course, it was easy to surmise that Consort Sun had orchestrated it. When he doted on her, he could tacitly allow her reckless behavior, but when his favor waned, he began to belatedly resent her cruelty, even though that very cruelty had been nurtured by his own permissive indulgence in the first place. The emperor's sense of guilt reached its peak as he unconsciously walked to Gulu's side. His imperial son was injured, leading to a high fever and unconsciousness. Seemingly having nightmares and murmuring in his sleep, he said, "Mother Empress, has Father Emperor abandoned us? Did I do something wrong?" The emperor's footsteps halted, then he spat a mouthful of old blood that stained the floor red. 31. To the court officials' complete surprise, the emperor recalled the deposed crown prince to the capital and restored his royal status. Gulu is now the eldest prince, titled Prince Yen. Of course, it wasn't just relying on the emperor's slight sense of guilt. The assassin who attempted to kill the emperor some time ago was arranged by Gulu. His mother had already informed him about the faction represented by that jade token, and the Death Warriors that day were part of it. The Death Warriors made no effort to conceal the Yi family insignia on their clothing and weapons, blatantly signaling their connection to the late Empress Yi. But emperors are inherently suspicious. Who would be foolish enough to reveal their identity during an assassination? This must be a deliberate frame-up, aiming either to kill him or, failing that, to shift blame onto others and clear their own name. The only suspects, naturally, are Consort Sun and Chancellor Lu's faction. The emperor knew he had been neglecting Consort Sun recently. Perhaps they feared the throne might change hands and wanted to eliminate him to install Prince An as soon as possible. Moreover, after investigating Consort Sun's actions against Gulu, he had already grown suspicious of her. This emperor wasn't particularly clever, but he still understood basic tactics of warning and maintaining balance. So with a grand gesture, He directly infected Gu Lu as a prince to warn Consort Sun's faction, preventing them from monopolizing court power. By balancing both sides, the emperor could secure his position. In his past life, Gu Lu fought his way back to the capital alone, with only himself knowing the hardships endured, countless brushes with death and innumerable scars covering his body. By the time he reached the capital, there was no time for careful planning. He could only rely on speed and violence to prevail, slaughtering all who stood in his way. In the end, he earned the infamous reputation of a patricide and fratricide, and the throne he seized lacked solid foundations. Without sufficient supporting forces beneath him, his regime collapsed as easily as rotten wood when the time came. Now, he no longer needs to take so many risks, bear so many scars, or leave behind a vile name that would stink for millennia. He also has ample time to firmly establish himself at the heart of the vortex of power. The palace held a banquet to welcome the return of the eldest prince. I stood in a small corner frequented by palace maids and eunuchs, a dim and secluded spot that drew no attention. Gazing from afar at Gu Lu amidst the dazzling lights, imperial relatives and courtiers gathered around him with flattery and fawning, though their words carried veiled probing. The noble prince in purple robes, with jade-like features and slender, elegant hands, toyed with his wine cup, wearing an inscrutable faint smile throughout, just as I had once hoped he would be, safe, prosperous, and radiant. 32. For years past in the blink of an eye, the emperor, consumed by excessive worry, now appears like a lamp burning its last drop of oil. Anyone with eyes can see his days are numbered, and various factions are beginning to stir. Over these years, Gu Lu has firmly established himself in the court. With the support of many military officers and noble families connected to the Yi family behind him, he stands evenly matched against the faction of Consort Sun and Prince In. Court officials have begun secretly choosing sides. Of course, on the surface, none of this has much to do with me. I hold a position in the Imperial Medical Bureau, serving as the emperor's personal physician, specifically overseeing his illness. On the surface, Gu Lu and I had no apparent connection. After completing my daily routine of taking the emperor's pulse, I was about to leave the palace when Prince In, Gu Jin, blocked my path. He offered to carry my medicine box, but I declined. Then he proposed to escort me home, which I also refused. Then he flew into a rage. Lu Tian, it's an honor for you to receive my kindness. Don't be ungrateful. The eunuchs and palace maids behind him all tensed up with fear. I watched him quietly for a long moment before saying, Lu Xian is here. Every time Lu Xian saw Gu Jin being attentive to me, she would make a huge scene, and Gu Jin was terrified of it. His expression indeed became unnatural, yet he still refused to leave. Lu Xian threw a massive tantrum, but since Gu Jin ignored her, she had no choice but to storm off angrily, shooting me a glare before leaving. No sooner had she left than Consort Sun arrived. Seeing her highly favored son following me again, her face immediately darkened. She accused me of seducing the imperial heir, threatened to discipline me, and raised her hand to slap me. Gu Jin, who had been so arrogant just moments ago, instantly lost his temper. He rushed to Consort Sun's side, grabbed her hand, and begged her to hit him instead, his voice trembling with tears. Mother, you can't hit her. If you scare little Lu away, who will I serve and slave for in the future? Shameless, but utterly unapologetic. A single sentence nearly made Consort Sun faint from rage, as she stormed off dragging her usually beloved son by the ear in a fit of anger. It was also a way for her to save face, since she wouldn't dare actually lay hands on me. I'm the imperial physician, a court-appointed official, and the emperor's most trusted one at that. Free from Gu Jin's presence, I could finally leave the palace to attend to important matters. Prince In was a spoiled noble, but upon closer acquaintance I found him also talkative, weepy, clingy, and impossible to shake off. Every encounter gave me a terrible headache. After everyone had left, a palace maid handed me a bunch of wild gardenias and whispered, "The young master said the lady likes these flowers." Before brushing past me and departing, they were picked by Gu Lu himself in the mountains. The autumn hunt is about to begin. He's not in the capital, having been ordered to prepare the hunting grounds in advance. Every day he sends over some fresh little trinkets I like, which also serves as his way of subtly reporting he's safe. After all, with such a perfect opportunity, there are surely those who would arrange assassins to kill him outside. That palace maid just now seemed to be from Consort Sun's palace. Indeed, it was Gu Lu who had someone come to help me out of that predicament. As for Lu Xian, I was the one who brought her here. Before Consort Sun made her public appearance, she lived alone with her child. The emperor, unable to visit them frequently, entrusted the care of the mother and child to his trusted minister. Chancellor Lu Qingshi, aware of their true identities, sought to build a good relationship. Coincidentally, his youngest daughter was around the same age as the second prince, so he persuaded the emperor to settle the mother and child in the manor where Lu Xian was recuperating, claiming the place had excellent feng shui and was beneficial for health. Thus, few outsiders knew that Lu Xian and Gu Jin had actually grown up together as childhood friends. Later, the emperor brought consort's son into the palace. Given her humble origins, granting her a high rank would invite criticism. Lu Qingshi took the initiative to share the emperor's burden by acknowledging consort's son as his cousin, allowing her to enter the palace under the identity of the prime minister's relative. This enabled her to gradually rise to the position of consort. Consort's son was naturally pleased to ally with Lu Qingshi, and the two became tied together in their interests. The prime minister's residence firmly supported the second prince's faction. Naturally, both sides tacitly assumed that Lu Xian would become Gu Jin's future empress. Lu Xian herself believed she loved Gu Jin, but he defied expectations by declaring she was merely his sister and insisted on marrying me as his princess consort. Naturally, no one would approve of this proposal except himself. In the past, when I didn't want Gu Jin to pester me, I'd call Lu Xian over, and Gu Jin would quickly leave to avoid her antics. But recently, this trick has become less effective. Speaking of which, all this actually started because of Lu Xian. For years ago during the palace banquet, Lu Qingshi, who came to attend the feast, unexpectedly bumped into me head-on and froze in shock on the spot, because I resemble him, and also my mother. With just a casual guess, suspicions about my origins could arise. He secretly went to Luoqing but returned empty-handed, failing to find my mother or the rumored daughter she had given birth to. I had already taken my mother away, and now she lives in hiding with Gu Lu's mother in a secret location. In this life, I still go by the name Lu Tian publicly. Apart from my mother, only Gu Lu and a few others know that my childhood name was a Tao. My appearance, background, and name all point to me being the daughter he always knew of but never met, though he lacks direct evidence. So Lu Qingshi sought me out and proposed that I return to my ancestral roots. Of course, it wasn't out of a guilty conscience. It's because my words now carry weight with the emperor, making me valuable. This time, he couldn't find any leverage against me, so he resorted to bribery, offering many benefits and even suggesting I bring my mother to the prime minister's residence to be elevated as an equal wife. No matter how much he said, I played dumb, firmly refusing to admit I was his daughter. My refusal left Lu Qingshi with no recourse, and he stormed off in frustration. None of us noticed that Lu Xian accidentally overheard this conversation. She learned that her father once had another woman and a daughter just slightly older than herself, and even talked about elevating someone else to equal wife status. Lu Xian couldn't keep things to herself. She stormed over to me, much like in our past life, grinding her teeth as she waved a hairpin near my face, threatening to slash the face of this seductress's daughter. In my eyes, her current actions were nothing but empty bluster. I kicked her ankle, snatched the hairpin from her hand when she fell, and tossed it aside. The short blade hidden in my sleeve slid out, and with malicious delight, I shaved off one of her eyebrows, ensuring she wouldn't dare show her face outside for some time, saving me from her interference. The effect was surprisingly good, and Lu Xian became well-behaved from then on. However, while she settled down, her childhood sweetheart felt indignant about it. As I carried the decoction to deliver it to the emperor, a large tiger suddenly pounced at me. I barely dodged, and the medicine bowl fell on me, staining my green robe brown and leaving my hand scalded red. The tiger advanced step by step, exuding an overwhelming sense of pressure. I had no idea where this beast came from in the palace. Having grown up in the mountains, I knew I couldn't run away. I had to find a way to survive. Gripping the sharp dagger hidden in my sleeve, I was just planning my next move when a bloodied goose was thrown at my feet. The tiger immediately rushed over, snatched the dead goose, and began tearing into it. Completely ignoring me, a domineering voice came from behind. "Scared stiff, aren't you? Remember, that dead girl from the Lu family isn't someone you can mess with. This is just a warning. If I catch you bullying her again, I won't be so polite. My pet here has grown up feasting on human flesh." I turned around and met the gaze of the person on the wall. He froze, then tumbled headfirst off the wall, landing flat on his back. In my 2 lifetimes, I've met countless people who were instantly smitten by my beauty at first sight. Gu Jin was the most ridiculous among them. After I spilled the medicine I'd brewed all night and burned my hands red and swollen, the emperor found out. Gu Jin, who had always been spoiled and unruly, was humiliated for once, made to kneel outside his father's hall for a beating, then ordered to atone by assisting me while whimpering in pain. Perhaps he got used to being ordered around then. Because later Gu Jin kept clamoring about serving me like an ox or horse for life. Of course, when he first said this, the emperor overheard and gave him another beating. Gu Lu laughed uncontrollably when he found out, his peerlessly handsome face glowing with such radiant beauty as he gently and meticulously applied medicine to my hand before bandaging it neatly and beautifully. A physician cannot heal himself. The wound on my right hand still needed someone else to dress it properly. With his head bowed, Gu Lu's raven feather lashes half covered his phoenix eyes as he casually held my other uninjured hand and said, Arateo can bully whoever she wants. If it happens again, there's still no need to hold back. Don't be afraid, you have someone to stand up for you. Although Gu Lu had just returned to the capital at that time, nothing in the palace could escape his notice. Later, for some reason, the emperor, who had grown accustomed to it, suddenly took issue with Prince N's idleness again, confiscating all his beloved pets raised for cockfighting and dog racing, then sending him to military camp for 3 years of training. Gu Lu even personally trained several shadow guards specifically responsible for my protection. On several later occasions when I went out and encountered assassination attempts, thanks to them, I emerged unscathed every time. I know who arranged those assassinations. Lu Qingshi. He tried to win me over but failed. He's aware that what he did to my mother's family is detestable. Perhaps both my mother and I rejected him. He feared my hatred posed a threat, so he decided to eliminate the root of the problem. Even though I'm his biological daughter, and even though deep down, he must have once felt something for my mother, several times I narrowly escaped death, yet I stopped Gu Lu from taking revenge on him. Lu Qingshi has built his power over many years. He can't be toppled overnight. With Consort's son still protecting him, it's better to gather our strength and take them all down in one decisive blow. I pretended not to know who sent the assassins. Instead of acting against him, I often praised Lu Qingshi in front of the emperor, using the Prime Minister Lu's residence's name to do good deeds and help build his reputation. His image as a virtuous statesman grew ever more flawless and deeply rooted in people's hearts. Both Gu Lu and I have been constant thorns in Lu Qingshi's side. Unable to decipher my thoughts, he ceased acting rashly, and we maintained a superficial peace for 3 or 4 years. But now, I have no intention of keeping this peace. I returned to my imperial-granted residence and placed the bouquet of wild gardenias by the window, their subtle fragrance slowly permeating the air. Glancing at the sky, dark and heavy, as if about to rain, it seemed this would be the last great storm before summer's end. Autumn would soon arrive, and in a few more months, winter would follow. In her previous life, Gu Lu died during this very winter. My heart began aching again, so I took a sip of bitter tea to suppress it. 33. It's time to conclude this grand game of chess. Lu Xiyan was born prematurely and had been frail and sickly since childhood. Having rarely lived in the Prime Minister's residence, Lady Lu missed her daughter dearly. For over a decade, she would climb the mountain every month to pray for her daughter's health and smooth sailing life. To orchestrate a natural encounter with her, I started visiting the same temple irregularly months in advance, claiming to pray for the emperor's blessings while actually idling about fishing with the old monk, catching and releasing and catching. I'd make mischief on the side, grilling ugly big fish to eat as stray cats gathered to fight me for them, keeping the pretty little fish I couldn't bear to release, handing them all to Gu Lu to raise. I'd kill any fish I tried to keep myself, but fortunately Gu Lu could do anything. The monk himself observed nonviolence but never stopped me. I don't need to pray for anyone's blessings. Long ago, I'd already begged heaven countless times. Proof showed it was useless. If I want someone healthy and prosperous, I'll scheme my way there step by step. This was also the day Lady Lu came up the mountain. Having watched the old monk lecture novices on scriptures for quite some time, I wandered outside upon hearing of her arrival. The sky darkened ominously, and sure enough, a sudden downpour sent me taking shelter in a nearby pavilion. Before long, Lady Lu, caught in the rain on her return journey, also ducked into the same pavilion. Standing at the edge of the pavilion, I gazed at the distant mountains, all withered and yellow, veiled by a curtain of rain as cool mist brushed against my face. I turned around and greeted her. Madame Lu couldn't help but observe me. I struck up a conversation with her, and as we chatted, I said, "Madam, there's a little story I believe you'd be interested in hearing. Once, there was a scholar of humble origins." Her eyes were full of understanding. She knew my identity. She probably thought I was going to tell her about my mother and Lu Qingshi, but instead I said, "He resorted to any means necessary to enter the imperial capital, achieving the top honors in the exams and parading through the streets in glory. Yet soon after, he realized that those he had defeated in the exams all held higher official positions than him. Because they came from noble families while he had no background or connections, his career path was clearly visible from the start. Unwilling to accept this fate, he targeted one of the most prominent noble families in the capital, the Li family, and their unmarried eldest daughter. During her spring outing, he recited a poem tailored to her tastes, capturing her attention. Their encounter seemed fated, as they kept meeting in various places, and the young lady gradually fell in love, eventually marrying him. She never knew that every one of their meetings had been carefully orchestrated by the scholar, including the heroic rescue from a near assault. After marriage, to please the Li family and cultivate the image of a devoted husband, he dismissed his previous concubines. Who would have guessed that such a seemingly perfect man would, in order to crush a political rival, personally arrange for his pregnant wife to fall into the water, framing the rival's favored imperial consort. The consort lost favor, and the rival was ruined. His wife, nearly dying from the premature birth, barely managed to deliver their daughter, leaving her unable to bear children again. Meanwhile, the scholar, having defeated his competitor and gained the emperor's sympathy, rose swiftly through the ranks. The pitiful Lady Li, believing herself at fault for failing to bear a son, was overwhelmed with gratitude when he promised never to abandon her. Later, their prematurely born daughter, who had been painstakingly raised, became a pawn in his schemes. To ingratiate himself with the exiled second prince, the scholar deliberately arranged for his daughter to pass by during a fight, resulting in her being accidentally injured. The frail child hovered between life and death, recovering only after months of care. Out of guilt, the second prince personally tended to her, and as the scholar had hoped, the two grew close. 2 lifetimes are enough for me to see through anyone. Lu Qingshi is a hypocritical and selfish man who would stop at nothing for personal gain. In truth, he loves no one but himself. In my previous life, he went to great lengths to arrange for me to enter the palace in place of Lu Xian, not out of concern for her, but because she was the legitimate daughter, a better bargaining chip with greater utility he didn't want to waste. After speaking, I turned to the stunned woman across from me and smiled radiantly. The rain has stopped. Might Madame Li give this humble girl a ride back to your estate? Hearing my form of address, she didn't object. It seemed she had tacitly accepted the truth of my words. I had ridden a horse up the mountain. Before leaving, I entrusted the steed to the old monk. I won't be coming back anymore. This little fellow will do well with you. The old monk was the former abbot, now aged. He has reached the stage of following his heart's desires without overstepping boundaries at 70. He often travels through mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas. For the little colt, following him means not being confined to the stable every day. Nothing could be better. The old man didn't say any parting words, just as casual as every time I left before. He waved his hand, signaling me to go quickly. Finally, no one would disturb his fishing, but this time, after I took a few steps, he called me back again. He repeated the words he had warned me when we first met. Back then, I wasn't familiar with the temple's paths and got lost, stumbling upon the old abbot by the stream in the back mountain. After studying me for a while, he said, "Little girl, to defy fate and alter destiny is to bear the karma for others." Truly a venerable old monk who can fish daily yet still gain worldwide fame and high prestige, with his discerning eyes seeing through the ages. At parting, he admonished me once more, to which I still gave no reply. The old man gave me addresses of many temples scattered across the land, saying he would go there to preach. If I ever found myself with nothing to do, I could seek him out and travel the world together. I said okay. Turning around, I boarded my wife's carriage to descend the mountain. The mountain scenery along the way looked somewhat desolate. I still remember passing through here in my past life when Gulu took me hunting. When hungry, we dropped by a nearby temple to share the vegetarian meals prepared by the monks. It was the same temple. Upon returning to the city and approaching the Prime Minister's residence, it became apparent that the crowd had completely surrounded the main gate. From a distance, one could faintly see someone kneeling at the entrance, wailing loudly. It was a grimy, pitiful-looking mother and daughter pair, crying hysterically in the street as they revealed the Prime Minister's secret. They accused him of murder for profit, abducting a virtuous young lady, and abandoning the pregnant pair in the mountains to fend for themselves. It had taken them over a decade to track down this heartless man, only to find he'd already achieved fame and married an official's daughter. The two performers were extremely professional even while sobbing. They delivered their story with perfect clarity, their tearful words moving all who heard. The outraged onlookers spat at the stone lions guarding the residence, ensuring the Prime Minister's scandal would soon spread through every street and alley. How laughable now seemed the capital's once celebrated romantic tale of the talented scholar and beauty meeting through poetry. the lady silently lowered the carriage curtain. After sending me back to the residence, she remained silent for a long while before leaving with these words. The eldest young master is immensely fortunate to have you. The next day, along with the news of the Chancellor's former lover seeking him out spreading throughout the capital, came word that the Chancellor's wife had divorced him and taken their daughter back to her family home. It was said she declared they would sever all ties from then on. This signified the rupture between the Li family and Chancellor Lu's household. Then, even greater blows followed in quick succession. I released that so-called miracle doctor again. After all these years of suffering from the poison's torment, he had become emaciated to the point of being skin and bones. In outsiders' eyes, the divine physician returned from travels to visit his disciple. Upon entering the palace, he discovered the emperor's sachet contained a slow-acting poison harmless to the emperor himself. Step by step, he deduced that Consort Sun had been poisoning Empress Xi through the emperor. Empress Xi's sudden death years ago might have been her doing. With the poison supplied by Chancellor Lu, the emperor immediately coughed up another mouthful of blood. Truthfully, I didn't wrong Consort Sun. She truly committed this deed. The previous life's Empress Xi likely died because of this. This lifetime, I intervened early to prevent history from repeating. I deliberately withheld this from the emperor, waiting for the perfect moment when that divine physician would expose it. Officially my master, his medical skills should surpass mine. After spending 3 to 4 years in the palace without noticing this scheme, his discovery would appear logical and wouldn't cast doubt on my competence. The emperor had just awakened from unconsciousness when the divine physician collided with Lu Qingshi's carriage and died on the spot. In recent years, the divine physician had frequently returned to the capital to offer free medical services. Earning immense love from the city's residents, countless people on the street witnessed him being fatally struck by the prime minister's carriage, sparking public outrage. Combined with the incident involving the mother and daughter a few days prior, Lu Qingshi's carefully cultivated reputation collapsed overnight. The flawless reputation he had built over the years was now turning against him with extraordinary ferocity, leading many citizens to jointly petition for Prime Minister Lu's removal. The ailing emperor demoted Consort Sun to a lower rank and exiled Prime Minister Lu from the capital. The Li family was the first to kick him while he was down, kneeling and loudly praising the emperor's wisdom. However, Lu Qingshi had operated in the court for years, with intertwined interests and deep-rooted connections. A large number of civil and military officials petitioned for leniency on his behalf, forcing the emperor to retract his decree and leaving him imprisoned in a stalemate. I went to visit him in prison. The remaining jailers were all Gu Lu's men, so I spoke freely and finally acknowledged our relationship. Father, when you sent assassins after me, did you ever imagine it would come to this? Lu Qingshi finally grasped my tactics of flattery to destroy, sowing discord, and framing. He sneered. Do you think such methods can topple this prime minister? Of course not. A centipede dies but never falls down. So today I'm here to add another layer, a simple, childish but foolproof method of provocation. I also laughed. Hasn't it already been toppled? Prime Minister, eating spoiled food, sleeping on withered grass, covered in fleas, still have the nerve to boast. Lu Qingshi angrily flicked his sleeve and turned his back to me, stepping out of the dim prison cell. Gu Lu waited for me in the light at the end. The sunlight illuminated his face. His exquisite features like polished jade, radiant and dazzling. He pulled me onto the carriage, casually wiping away a drop of blood that had splashed on my face as we passed the execution ground. His deep eyes reflected my pure, flawless face. Atao, you've lost so much weight. I grabbed his hand and pressed it against the flesh of my cheek. So much meat here. What nonsense are you spouting? Gu Lu smiled. After picking me up, 15 drove the carriage to a secluded tavern. We stayed there until evening when people began entering the adjacent room. Unbeknownst to them, behind a potted plant in the corner was a peephole, allowing us to observe their every move. I saw Lu Qingshi bundled up tightly, along with Consort Sun and some advisors from the Prime Minister's residence, gathered together discussing something. I wasn't surprised at all to see Lu Qingshi here. He must have found a stand-in to take his place in prison, slipping away to secretly plot his comeback. I knew exactly what they were discussing, nothing more than a palace coup. They hadn't yet realized that it was Gu Lu and I who had led them down this path. My role was to apply pressure, forcing Lu Qingshi and Consort Sun into a corner, while Gu Lu handled the enticements. Long ago, he had arranged for a fake jade token to be planted, pretending it was accidentally obtained by Consort Sun, making the covert soldiers under his command feign allegiance to them. Thus, Lu Qingshi and Consort Sun always believed they held a trump card. In reality, their trump card was fake. Many officials they had won over were only pretending to side with them, and even some of the advisors now by their side were actually Gu Lu's people. The advisors next door said the autumn hunt was a perfect opportunity to force the emperor's abdication and stage a rebellion, a chance not to be missed, as it wouldn't come again, so, the group hastily finalized their plan, after they left. Gu Lu and I exited through the secret passage of the tavern. This was their usual meeting spot, but Lu Qingshi still didn't know the tavern owner had long since pledged loyalty to someone else. On the day of the autumn hunt, the emperor symbolically rode out to hunt a few wild animals, only to be surrounded by an unfamiliar army. Gu Lu, in an attempt to rescue his father, was forced to the edge of a cliff with him and ultimately leaped off alongside the emperor. No one was found below. The emperor and the Prince of Yin went missing after being assassinated during the autumn hunt. With no one in charge at court, Lu Qingshi was brought out from prison to stabilize the situation. He pretended to organize a search for a few days before concluding they couldn't be found, then began arranging funerals and swiftly organized the coronation of a new emperor. Thus, the second prince ascended the throne. The demoted consort's son directly became the Empress Dowager. Ruling from behind the curtain, Lu Qingshi was reinstated as prime minister and eventually granted the title of regent. Everything unfolded exactly as they desired, in boundless glory, but Gu Lu was never someone so easy to deal with. Allowing them to succeed once was to draw out both their overt and covert forces, then strike them down at their most unguarded moment, leaving no hidden dangers. Everything went as we planned, except for an unexpected incident. The chaos at the autumn hunt caused me, who was accompanying the emperor, to get separated and be detained by Lu Qingshi. During the period when Gu Lu disappeared with the emperor, I remained alone in the capital, confined under house arrest in my own residence. I never expected Gu Lu to risk coming for me in the dead of night that very evening, wanting to take me away, but I refused. If I suddenly disappeared at this moment, it would surely alert the enemy. After being under house arrest for several days, I realized my safety wasn't a concern at all. Lu Qingshi had no intention of retaliating against me. He couldn't bring himself to kill me. Among his 3 daughters, I was the fiercest, the smartest, and the most beautiful, which made me his favorite. When I posed a threat to him, he wouldn't hesitate to kill me no matter how innocent the first was. But when I was no longer a threat, even though I had schemed against him, he didn't mind and still wanted to include me in the family registry. On top of that, there was Gu Jin, who had donned the noble yellow robes and ascended the imperial throne, yet remained utterly spineless. When Empress Dowager's son came to trouble me, he just brought a white silk cord, tied it to a nearby tree, and made a scene, crying, shouting, and threatening to hang himself. Even as a puppet emperor, he could still give the powerful ministers and Empress Dowagers headaches. The only downside was that Gu Jin wanted to make me his empress, and this time, aside from Lu Xian, no one objected. Then again, it didn't really matter who held the position of empress for a puppet emperor. I was moved to a different place under house arrest, living in the palace. Lu Xian rushed back overnight from the estate, storming in angrily with a sword in hand, pointing it straight at me. Why should she be the empress? Gu Jin quickly pulled me behind him, shielding me from the sword's tip, trying to persuade her with words. Iron blades have no eyes. Could you put it down first before we talk? Lu Xian shouted furiously in refusal. As the two stood at a stalemate, I stepped around Gu Jin and gently grasped the sharp blade with my soft hand, instantly silencing the hall, under Lu Xian's bewildered gaze. I lightly held the sword and slowly pushed it into my own chest. I stared into her eyes with a shallow smile, speaking softly. Why do you always love to bluff? Though Lu Xian had a spoiled temperament, she was far from being someone who would disregard human life. She froze, only reacting when blood flowed down the sword onto her hand, her face turning deathly pale as she tugged at Gu Jin and shouted, "Call the imperial physician. Hurry, hurry." Gu Jin immediately carried me and sprinted toward the imperial hospital. The physicians fumbled in panic as they took me over. Lu Xian refused to leave, crying uncontrollably while muttering beside me, "Lu Tian, you're absolutely insane. You better not die." It sounded so noisy to my ears. I was the one who stabbed myself, so of course I knew where to strike to avoid fatal injury, but the pain was unavoidable. This was actually done to avoid serving in the bedchamber, delaying the so-called coronation ceremony, a spur-of-the-moment idea that wasn't very well thought out. The wound hurts, and so does the heart. The commotion was eerily similar to the scene in my past life when Wei Qingyu stabbed me through the heart. The pain made me dizzy, and I fainted amidst all the noise. 34. In my past life, Gu Lu once said he wanted to make me his empress. He only mentioned it that one time, but the next morning he flatly denied it and never brought it up again. It was the depths of winter then, coinciding with the anniversary of his mother's death. Gulu was naturally in a foul mood, and the cold aggravated his leg ailment. Affected by lingering toxins in his body, he lost control more frequently, leaving bloodshed daily within and beyond the palace walls. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief when the tyrant left the palace to mourn his mother. In the quiet of night, the rustling snowfall was interrupted by an odd sound. I woke with a start and sat up. Peering through the dim candlelight at a dark silhouette in the pitch-black room, it was Gulu. As I approached with the candle, I realized he was covered in wounds, blood gushing from his abdomen, his eyes red, yet he remained eerily silent. On his way back to the palace, Gulu was ambushed, all his attendants and guards were killed, and the attackers also suffered heavy casualties. In the end, only he remained, slipping back into the palace unnoticed. He didn't return to his own chambers or seek a royal physician. Instead, he climbed through my window and barged into my room. The tyrant harbored deep distrust toward all royal physicians, something I had noticed long ago. Perhaps it stemmed from his childhood experience as a test subject for medicines, or perhaps he feared that even the court physicians might plot against him. In any case, he always tended to his own wounds. Constant suffering had made him a skilled healer. Though the scars he left behind were often jagged, sitting on the most exalted throne in the land, he resembled nothing so much as a wild dog licking its wounds alone in a dark corner, especially in this state of delirium, killing anyone who approaches. Yet he doesn't seem to reject me. I carefully remove his outer garments, tend to his wounds, light charcoal to warm him up, and slowly feed him warm congee. Gulu's gaze gradually clears, meeting mine under the warm glow of candlelight. The still warm congee bowl still in my hands, his eyes are filled with dazed confusion, flickering momentarily with a trace of feverish longing and vulnerability. He embraces me, silent for a long time, until the congee turns cold. Then, in a hoarse voice, he says, "Atao, why don't you become my empress? I'll dismiss all the useless people in the palace, leaving only you and me. Those in court with rebellious hearts will be purged step by step. And the loyal old ministers I once drove away will be invited back. We'll govern the nation and its people with diligence, ruling as bright as the sun and moon, letting them praise it as the empress's virtue and the emperor's redemption." Perhaps at that moment, under the warm candlelight, he had a fleeting impulse to save himself, but as he spoke, he began coughing, the coughs growing increasingly violent until he finally spat out a mouthful of dark blood. The warmth in his eyes instantly vanished, his dazed expression replaced by its usual inscrutable darkness. He reached out and overturned the bowl of cold congee, his face weary and aloof. "Just joking, don't take it seriously." That night, Gulu fell into a deep sleep on the couch beside my bed. By the time I woke the next morning, he was already gone. Later when I asked about it, he flatly denied it and never mentioned it again. Later I came to understand that Gulu at that time could already feel his life fading away, his body broken and teetering on the edge. That mouthful of black blood was like a wake-up call, warning him not to indulge in wishful thinking. Moreover, by then the country had already been ruined beyond recognition by him, and the common people hated him to the core. He never expected a good ending for himself, so he didn't leave any way out. Such a situation couldn't be reversed and turned beautiful overnight. At that time, everyone was hoping for Gulu to die quickly. Lu Qingshi once again threatened me using my mother, urging me to quickly use the poison he gave me. I kept delaying, and then one day Lu Qingshi showed rare mercy by allowing my mother to visit me in the palace. Just as I stepped forward to greet her, I saw her pull out a hidden weapon and charge at Gulu, and Gulu, without hesitation, drew the sword from the attendant beside him and instantly pierced through my mother's frail body. My mother collapsed in a pool of blood. Gulu turned his head and saw me. He paused for a moment, wiped the blood from his hands, looked at me, and spoke in a calm voice. "Do you hate me?" he asked. I was in a dazed state the entire time, numbly checking my mother's breath. It was faint, she was dying, clearly beyond saving. Then staring blankly at Gulu, I could guess what had happened. Lu Qingshi had somehow manipulated my mother into a suicidal attack against Gulu. Success would be ideal, but failure didn't matter. It would make me hate Gulu and follow through with poisoning the tyrant as planned. Yet Gulu showed no mercy despite knowing she was my mother, leaving no room for compassion. This was what I couldn't understand. But after waiting so long, Gulu still offered no explanation. My mother's corpse was dragged away, staggering back to my own palace. I crouched in a corner hugging my knees, motionless, sitting in desolation for what felt like an eternity. Then I wanted to find Wei Qingyu, floating like a wandering spirit to her doorstep, only to witness a strange man inside. The two were actually conspiring to assassinate the tyrant during the upcoming sacrificial ceremony. Gulu truly faced assassination attempts, or preparations for them, from all manner of people at every turn, a tyrant of notorious infamy. Everyone longed to skin him alive, tear out his tendons, and crush his bones. The stranger noticed me and instantly darted before me, pressing a blade to my throat, ready to silence me forever. Wei Qingyu stopped him. Brother, she's different from the other concubines. If you kill her now, the tyrant will surely investigate, which would disrupt our plans. Leave it to me, I'll handle it. The man hesitated for a moment, glanced at me, then nodded and left. Wei Qingyu said he was her half-brother, serving in the palace as a minor commander of the Imperial Guards. She explained that she entered the palace solely for the day they would assassinate the tyrant. Her entire family had worked toward this goal for years. Her father, the Marquis of Wuan, enfeoffed by the late emperor, had devoted his life to defending the nation with unwavering loyalty. He loathed the new emperor, who murdered his own father and brother and trampled on the people, to honor his title. He staked their clan's lives to overthrow the tyrant. She said, Lu Tian, if you have any conscience left, you know what choice to make. Wei Qingyu stopped her brother, saying she would deal with me, but in reality she did nothing, betting that I wouldn't expose them. But I simply didn't know what choice to make. Gulu is indeed a tyrant whom everyone has the right to punish. They were sustained by the people's provisions, so naturally they were taught to share the people's burdens. But I grew up being bullied by the vicious folk of barren mountains and treacherous waters. Apart from my late aunt, the common folk of this world have shown me no kindness. Instead, it was the tyrant who saved me time and again. Gulu killed my mother, so I should hate him deeply. Everyone in this world loves their birth mother because they grew up under her care, so naturally they would consider this an irreconcilable enmity. But I was raised with beatings and curses from my mother. She wished for my death, and indeed, whenever the mood struck her, she tried to kill me. In contrast, the tyrant treated me with immense kindness. He is everyone's nightmare, but my personal moon. The world's principles tell me to rid the people of evil, yet also teach me to repay kindness with gratitude. Everyone resolutely hates the current Gulu, including himself, who cares little for his own fate. Only I remain torn between choices. In a daze, I reached the day of the state sacrifice without exposing Wei Qingyu and his group, allowing messages to pass under my watch before the sudden uprising. This rebellion wasn't just the Wei family's doing. Multiple factions united, making it larger in scale than any before. Wei Qingyu was close by, thrusting her sword towards Gulu when I suddenly rushed in front of her, blocking that fierce strike. The blade pierced through flesh, the pain making me tremble as I spoke with deep sorrow. To be truly blameless in heart is so very hard. I wouldn't stop them from overthrowing the tyrant, but sacrificing myself to save Gulu, this was the only choice I could make. Blameless before the common people, and blameless before my shattered moon. Gulu froze, his fingertips trembling slightly as he caught my collapsing form. Wei Qingyu stared wide-eyed at the blood on her hands, shoving away the traitors rushing toward her as she screamed in anguish. Lu Tian, you fool, you absolute fool. Why did you throw yourself in front of me? My head throbbed dully with pain, the world around me a chaotic blur of noise. Through the haze, I could vaguely make out the sounds of a struggle nearby. Slowly, the blood loss became too much, and darkness swallowed me whole. When I came to, I found myself in an unfamiliar place. The wound on my shoulder wasn't life-threatening and had been neatly bandaged. As I got up, I spotted Gulu nearby, unconscious, or worse. He fought through the encirclement with me and escaped here, with many still hunting us down. The snow was falling heavily. Gulu must have tucked me into a snow-sheltering cave before collapsing. His breathing was faint, half buried in the snow, covered in wounds with blood frozen around him. He was as cold as a corpse. My hands turned red from the cold as I desperately dug him out of the snow, holding him to warm him up. But he remained icy, like a dead body. I wanted to cry, but my eyes were dry. Helplessly covering my face, I murmured to his unconscious form, Gulu, don't die, okay? No one responded to me. I gathered dried wood from all around to weave a crude raft, pushed Gulu onto it, and dragged the raft while enduring the pain of my wounds and the biting cold. Through the heavy snowfall, I trudged laboriously, step by difficult step, trying to take him to a place with people. The snow was truly endless, falling thick and fast. The world was both noisy and silent, with only the sound of wind and snow remaining. I don't know how long I dragged on, falling countless times, my wounds reopening until I became a bloodied figure. Weak yet stubbornly moving forward, I fell again, tumbling into a large pit along with the raft. Gulu landed on top of me. His fingers twitched as he struggled to wake up. Just as I began to feel relieved, his stiff hand touched my disheveled long hair and gently patted my head. He gazed at me deeply and called softly, "Atao." I waited for a long time, but there was no follow-up. Instead, Gu Lu knocked me unconscious with a chop of his hand. Much later, I belatedly realized that was the last time I saw Gu Lu in my previous life, a sudden, unprepared parting between life and death. When I awoke, the entire dynasty had been turned upside down. Several noble families had joined forces in rebellion, overthrowing the tyrant's rule before turning on each other. The regional lords, unwilling to be left out, also joined the fray. The court was in chaos, the people suffered, and displaced masses across the land rose up in revolt. The already crumbling dynasty disintegrated with overwhelming speed. Gu Lu was captured by them and hung at the city gate, awaiting execution by 1,000 cuts. I regained consciousness in a carriage racing southward. Wei Qingyu told me she had promised Gu Lu to protect me and take me far away. In the current situation, all factions were blinded by bloodlust. Staying with Gu Lu would inevitably implicate me, so he knocked me unconscious and handed me to Wei Qingyu, then allowed the pursuing soldiers she brought to capture him. In a sense, it was an unspoken exchange, his capture in exchange for my safe departure. I refused to leave. Insisting on going back, Wei Qingyu grew impatient. We've already traveled hundreds of miles. What good would going back do? Could it change anything? Don't be willful. Don't waste others' well-intentioned efforts. The capital is in chaos. If danger arises, I might not be able to protect you. I know there's danger, I said softly, almost meekly, pleading with her. It's not willfulness, it's the result of careful consideration. I want to go back to collect his remains. This wasn't willfulness. Whether it was her or Gu Lu, no one had ever asked for my opinion. My choice had always been the same, in all matters, with all people. I sought only to have no regrets in my heart. Wei Qingyu froze, remained silent for a long time, then had the coachman turn the carriage around. We raced toward the capital, but the distance was too great, and the journey took far too many days. Gu Lu was tied at the city gates, starving and freezing for days, barely clinging to life. When he was near death, he was publicly executed by Ling Qi, slow slicing. The common people below were eager to devour his flesh and crush his bones. Finally, his corpse was doused with oil and burned to ashes. Countless people flocked to the capital to witness this moment. Some wept, others laughed. Even his ashes were not spared, as people fought to scatter them to the winds. By the time I arrived, the snow had covered the bloodstains. The crowd had dispersed, and only a bloodied wooden frame remained standing. A once living person had vanished without a trace left in this world. In the end, I didn't have time to gather his remains. I knelt in the snow for a long time, my entire body numb from the cold, when I inexplicably remembered the little rabbit I once raised. When the rabbit died, it was the same bone-chilling cold. I fell into the snow holding its lifeless body, and when I looked up, I saw Gu Lu standing beneath the wintersweet tree. He personally helped me bury it, then built a rabbit snowman atop the grave. I didn't have time to gather his remains. My tears immediately became uncontrollable, and I covered my face, crying silently. In the end, Wei Qingyu forcibly pulled me up, dragged me back into the house, wrapped me in a blanket, warmed me by the charcoal fire, and then stuffed me into the carriage to set off again. She told me, "Your father is looking for you. With your striking appearance, those people have been coveting you for a long time. Your father probably wants to sell you for a good price again." The coachman flicked the whip to start the journey, taking the less traveled paths. Though there were some scares along the way, we made it safely until, just before exiting the city gate, we collided head-on with the Prime Minister's carriage in a narrow alley. On the other side was Lu Xian, with only her and her attendants present. Wei Qingyu watched her warily. Lu Xian seemed dazed, clutching an urn of unknown ashes in her arms, her eyes swollen from crying. She wasn't foolish. Realization dawned on her. "Lu Tian, it's you, isn't it?" Wei Qingyu was prepared for her to expose us to Lu Qingshi, yet Lu Xian stepped aside voluntarily, her voice no longer the bright, carefree tone of before but rather somber. "Go on." After a pause, she added, "Once you leave, don't come back. Ever since my mother learned of your and your mother's existence, she hasn't slept well night after night. She never says it, but I know she's truly heartbroken. That's why she hated seeing me and my mother. We were living proof of her once perfect father's betrayal and depravity, shattering the illusion of her previously blissful life. But she never truly intended to harm me. Lu Xian wasn't wicked by nature, which is why she chose to pretend not to see me, letting us pass by like strangers." Outside the city walls, we encountered another person on the road. Lu Shirong, who had been waiting by the roadside, stopped our carriage. With no one left in charge at the palace, many had stolen valuables and fled. Dressed in a maid's attire, Lu Shirong must have escaped as well. She said to Wei Qingyu, I know you're acquainted with Lu Tian, she must be in your carriage, I have something to give her. Wei Qingyu flatly denied knowing me and briskly ordered the coachman to drive around. Lu Shirong chased after the carriage for a long distance, still refusing to give up. Watching her, I hesitated for a moment before deciding to trust her this once. I jumped off the carriage and watched as Lu Shirong ran toward me step by step. She stopped in front of me, somewhat awkwardly skipping any form of address, and handed me a crumpled handkerchief. That person's finger bone. I fought through the crowd to get it. My hand trembled. Suddenly the handkerchief felt as heavy as 1,000 weights. Carefully unfolding it, I saw the small piece of tailbone wrapped inside, then rewrapped it and unconsciously clenched it in my palm. Thank you, I whispered. As I turned to leave, Lu Shirong called out to me again, her voice strained as she said, I used to think my father truly cared about my studies. Whenever I received praise from my teacher, I would proudly show him my best work, until one day, I discovered that all those results of my late-night toiling, he had never once looked at them properly, he just tossed them aside. I've never been able to forget that moment. Back then, when I said, you're just a pawn, no one cares about you or your worthless things, you've always been nothing but an unwanted wretch, I was actually mocking myself too. Lu Shirong hesitated for a moment before continuing uncertainly, I was too obsessed with winning my father's favor before, reckless and selfish, I even used you, hurting you so deeply, that was my fault, I'm sorry. Later, I dug up the ruined handkerchief you buried, washed it stitch by stitch, and mended it. The embroidery on it was truly lovely, so vivid. She asked tentatively, may I call you little sister? Perhaps Lu Shirong regretted it, having grown up unloved. She desperately craved her father's attention, only to realize too late that the one who truly cared for her, me, was the very person she had pushed away with her own hands. But it was too late. I no longer yearned for that meager, pitiful semblance of familial affection. Once someone has experienced the finest kind of love, they can no longer be easily moved by inferior substitutes. Perhaps this was also part of Gu Lu's intention. He made me no longer willing to tolerate those who had hurt me for the sake of petty, cheap affection. I said firmly, no. I boarded the carriage, watching Lu Shirong standing motionless in place grow farther away, her figure carrying endless regret and loneliness. We traveled south and eventually arrived at an unknown island. Though it was the tail end of winter and the beginning of spring, the southern flowers were already in full bloom. It was a beautiful and peaceful little island, isolated from the world, with cozy houses built on it. Inside, Gu Lu had left me a substantial sum of money, along with people he personally trained to protect me. My mother was also here, alive and well. Only then did I learn that Lu Qingshi had originally planned to use a double disguised as my mother, intending for her to die by Gu Lu's sword to provoke me. Gu Lu found out in advance and, by some means, replaced the double with my real mother. He struck her in a non-fatal spot, making everyone believe she had died. It was actually a golden cicada shedding its shell, a clever escape. He rescued my mother for me, freeing her from being controlled by others. He left me a complete and thorough escape route. I held that piece of finger bone and cried at the door. Later, I no longer knew what was happening outside. Wei Qingyu also stayed, saying she had promised Gu Lu to take care of me and refused to leave. I don't know how Gu Lu turned someone who initially only held hostility toward him into someone so stubbornly obedient to his words. Later, I understood. Wei Qingyu stabbed me with her sword, nearly killing me, and she had always felt guilty in her heart. Wei Qingyu's pastries were always exceptionally sweet. This was because her father, once stranded on the battlefield with no supplies, survived solely on the pastries her mother had packed for him. From then on, her mother made all pastries intensely sweet and passed down this same practice to her. She once said she learned pastry making from her mother as a child because she dreamed of becoming a female general guarding the frontier, bringing sweet cakes to battlefields being her family's proud tradition. Fearing no one would make them for her, she decided to master the skill herself. Later, she entered the palace, kept delaying her dream, then accompanied me to a remote island, where she postponed it indefinitely. Time slipped away in delays, until her death. She never returned to the frontier where she grew up. In our previous lives, we both lived very long. Through those endless years, I clung to memories of the past, forever trapped within them. Every time Gu Lu got injured or poisoned before, I would feel frustrated with myself for not being able to master medicine and rescue him from boundless suffering. So I later studied medicine, read all medical books under heaven, traveled across mountains and rivers, and saved countless lives. Yet the person I originally wanted to save no longer had the chance. In every midnight when I wake up startled, I imagine over and over again that I went back in time to save Gu Lu on the day he died, but later I realized it was meaningless. All of it was meaningless. Even if Gulu hadn't died that day, his body was already in ruins and wouldn't have lasted much longer. Even if the riot hadn't happened that day, perhaps days or months later, someone would have eventually taken the lead to overthrow the tyrant, one after another. Even if no one rebelled or revolted, Gulu would still have been hoist with his own petard and met a bad end. Because his inner self is broken, he has been giving up on himself. Just like able-bodied people wandering the streets, others only wonder why they don't just find any job to have a place to stay. Unaware that what they lack is not physical strength, but inner vitality, the drive to live well. In storybooks, the female lead redeeming the antagonist is so easy. Love alone can overcome all obstacles. But how can someone devoid of inner vitality be saved by shallow love? So back then I realized, if I could truly return to the past, I'd make Gulu continue loving himself and others, never abandoning himself, just as he gradually taught me to do. 35. I woke from unconsciousness to find only Gu Jin and Lu Xian remaining in the hall. They must have been taking turns watching by my bedside. Lu Xian was asleep at the foot of the bed, while Gu Jin was nodding off while propped against the table. Noticing I had woken up, Gu Jin abruptly stood and hurried to the bedside. Xiao Lu, you're awake. You're finally awake. You scared me to death. Does your wound hurt? That wretched Lu Xian. When we return, I'll have her father ground her for 300 years, plus 200 more in debt. By the way, the imperial kitchen has millet congee, plain porridge, and assorted pastries warming. Are you hungry? What would you like? I'll have it brought over. I said I wanted warm water. Cutting off his incessant chatter, Gu Jin eagerly poured tea like an attentive servant, without a trace of imperial dignity. As he watched me sip slowly, his expression suddenly darkened. Xiao Lu, the imperial physician said your injury isn't serious, but they mentioned you have a heart condition, excruciating when it flares up, and nearly untreatable. I've never seen you show any signs. Why have you been enduring it alone? I pretended not to hear him clearly, set down the cup, and naturally changed the subject. Send Lu Xian home. It's so late. Her mother must be extremely worried. Mainly, I wanted to send Gu Jin away. Not wanting to listen to his incessant chatter anymore, I was already exhausted. Gu Jin obediently complied, then seemed to remember something and specifically explained to me, Xiao Lu, I only see Ayan as a younger sister. Actually, she doesn't like me either. She just can't distinguish between affection, friendship, and familial love. Her father deliberately instilled in her from childhood the idea that she must become the future empress, and I'm her only option. She likes someone else. She just hasn't realized it yet. I know. I didn't care about these matters that had nothing to do with me. I just wanted to rest quietly. I know Lu Xian likes the little guard who grew up by her side. In our previous life, when we crossed paths in an alley, she was holding an urn of someone's ashes, her eyes swollen from crying, her expression vacant, her voice despondent. Later, I heard she married herself to a dead man and remained a widow in white for decades. That urn of ashes belonged to the little guard who died saving Lu Xian during that turmoil. In our previous life, after Lu Qingshi thought my mother had died, he was similarly heartbroken and filled with regret. In this life, after Madame Li left, Lu Qingshi also tried unwillingly to win her back many times, and after repeated rejections, he remained depressed for a long time, including Lu Shirong and Gu Lu's father, the emperor. Too many people only realize how precious something is after losing it, and then feel regret too late. At this moment, I suddenly wanted to see Gu Lu very much. After my wounds partially healed, I made a prayer lantern and wrote that line once again, may you live a long life, safe and sound year after year. The prayer lantern slowly drifts toward the night sky. Tonight the moon is bright, with no wind or snow, nor is it any festive occasion. In the vast darkness, only that solitary lamp rises steadily, flying toward the luminous moon. Modern people and ancients gaze upon the same moon. Both those inside and outside the palace could look up and see that lone point of light in the darkness. On the second night, I was shaken awake by a young palace maid, who excitedly said, Minister Lu, come outside quickly, it's so magnificent. I stepped outside, greeted by countless bright lanterns floating mid-air, their scattered glimmers illuminating the entire night sky. The young palace maid beside me suddenly fainted. Gu Lu emerged slowly from the darkness, strands of ink-black hair cascading over his violet robes, ethereal and noble, with dragon's grace and phoenix's bearing. In his slender, jade-like hand, he held a palace lantern. Do you like it? He asked softly. I nodded. Gu Lu took my hand. Come, I'll take you to the highest tower in the palace to see, carrying a lantern. He led me along a remote, pitch-black path, taking a detour to the star observation tower. Meanwhile, the long-prepared army silently flooded into the imperial capital, swiftly breached the city gates, and quickly surrounded the palace, along with the neighboring regent's mansion that had just changed its plaque, while Empress Dowager's son and the newly appointed regent were still dreaming of ruling the world. The supposedly deceased former emperor, escorted by Marquis Wuan, stormed back with a furious and grim expression. The situation instantly grew tense and unpredictable. Behind the scenes, Gu Lu, who could turn clouds with one hand and rain with the other, pulled me up to the rooftop of the star observation tower. If the old imperial astronomer found out, he'd probably be hopping mad. The heights were perilously cold, but Gu Lu magically produced a perfectly warm heating pad and pressed it into my palms. Then he took off his outer robe and wrapped me up tightly. I had initially felt a bit chilly, but now I was starting to feel too warm. Gu Lu claimed he was cold, encircling me through the thick layers of clothing and holding me tightly as we nestled together. A triumphant smile curled his lips, his eyes shining brilliantly like radiant clouds at sunset. Tao, I'll strive to live to 100 years old. You'll stay with me all the way, won't you? That wishing lantern seems to have been picked up by him again. My heart ached as I gently lied. Of course I will. Tonight's imperial capital is both romantic and bloody. On one side, 10,000 glowing lanterns descend like a starry river within reach, while on the other, gunpowder smoke rises as a thrilling power struggle for imperial authority unfolds. The moon hangs high in the ninth heaven, overlooking the joys and sorrows of the mortal world. After one night, Lu Qingshi and his companions were inevitably defeated. When they revealed their trump card, fully expecting to turn the tide, the covert troops who had been obedient to them suddenly betrayed them on the spot. Seeing the situation was hopeless, they decisively chose to flee. With deliberate leniency, Lu Qingshi managed to capture Emperor Min of Qi amidst the chaotic battle, using him as leverage to demand a horse-drawn carriage from the commanding Marquis Wuan. With the condition that no troops would follow, Marquis Wuan glanced subtly in this direction. Standing unnoticed in a corner, Gu Lu and I watched as he slightly raised his hand. The Marquis of Wuan agreed to their demands, obediently procured a carriage, and could only watch helplessly as Lu Qingshi abducted the former emperor and rode off into the distance, making no attempt to pursue them, believing they had escaped to fight another day. Lu Qingshi and his party left in such frantic haste that they failed to notice a person hidden beneath the carriage. Shiwu personally took action, hiding under the carriage and leaving markers along the way. Meanwhile, the people inside the carriage were too busy blaming each other to bother inspecting the vehicle. Gu Jin rode his horse in silence ahead, while chaos reigned inside. Emperor Qi Min had gone out hunting, only for everything to change in the blink of an eye. His once beloved woman and most trusted minister had joined forces to assassinate him in rebellion, especially Empress Dowager's son, whose betrayal was blatant. Having endured for so long, the sight of her again filled him with such hatred that, ignoring the blade at his neck, he lunged in a rage, pinning her down and strangling her with all his might, leaving no room for mercy. Clearly intent on killing her, Lu Qingshi watched coldly from the sidelines, hearing the commotion inside. Gu Jin sensed something was wrong and quickly halted the carriage. When he lifted the curtain, he froze in shock for a moment. Realizing the situation, he rushed forward to pull his father away, but the enraged Emperor Qi Min showed no mercy, kicking him to the ground. In desperation, Gu Jin seized Lu Qingshi's weapon and forced his father to let go, but in the heat of the moment, he accidentally stabbed and killed the emperor. Gu Jin stood stunned. Emperor Qi Min, slain by his own beloved son, died with his eyes wide open, glaring at the mother and son pair in unrelenting fury. Empress Dowager's son had already died at some point, her face twisted in a grotesque and horrifying expression. What a lamentable ending. Back when he schemed for so long, raided the Yi family in one fell swoop, deposed Empress Shi to the cold palace, and even exiled the crown prince she bore, all to welcome his beloved woman into the palace. Did he ever imagine it would come to this? As for Empress Dowager's son, who once strutted with arrogance, adding insult to Empress Xia's injury and deliberately tormenting Gu Lu, she likely never expected that she would meet her end at the hands of the very man who once showered her with boundless favor. With two deaths occurring in quick succession beside him, Lu Qingshi remained utterly indifferent, even visibly impatient. He discarded the corpse of Emperor Qi Min, the very ruler who had elevated him to the position of a powerful minister, from the carriage and was about to kick the other body out as well, eager to continue fleeing on horseback. But Gu Jin, barely recovering from the immense shock, stopped him, adamantly refusing to let him abandon her mother's remains. The two began to argue. Gu Lu and I had already arrived. Standing on a nearby hillside, I raised my bow, took aim at Lu Qingshi. and loosed an arrow that struck his leg. Lu Qingshi fell from the carriage, and at the same moment, Shiwu, who had been hiding beneath the vehicle, swiftly emerged to subdue Gu Jin. A team of officers arrived right behind them, efficiently binding both men tightly. The ministers who followed witnessed with their own eyes that the late emperor died at the hands of his second son, while Gu Lu was the one who captured the rebel for his father. The deliberate act of allowing them to abduct the emperor was all for this moment, to make the old emperor's death appear justified and to secure Gu Lu's support from the court officials. I brought Lu Qingshi to a small courtyard and pushed him down before my mother. "Your enemy. Take your revenge with your own hands." I casually tossed her a knife, a blunt one. In this lifetime, I could count on one hand the number of times I met her. After so many years apart, she couldn't even be bothered to glance at me, her gaze fixed unwaveringly on Lu Qingshi. Years of pent-up hatred surged in her heart as she picked up that blunt knife and without hesitation plunged it into the wound on Lu Qingshi's left leg. Lu Qingshi's face, usually as unshakable as Mount Tai, finally contorted in agony. He wailed in pain, cold sweat pouring down his body. My mother, like one possessed, stabbed him again and again, each strike carefully placed to avoid fatal wounds. By the end, Lu Qingshi was a bloody mess, still clinging to life, suffering in silence, too weak even to cry out. When he was nearly drained of blood, my mother asked him why he had done it, why he had repaid kindness with such cruelty, wiping out her entire family. Lu Qingshi weakly lifted his eyes and suddenly began to laugh, as if hearing the most absurd question. His laughter grew louder, his expression twisting into madness. "Why?" "Because I needed political achievements to establish myself in the officialdom. Of course, if I weren't ruthless enough, I'd probably still be a servant at someone's beck and call, wouldn't I? Parents as servants, children as servants, generation after generation with no hope of breaking free. If I weren't ruthless enough, I'd never have climbed to this position in my lifetime. Remaining just an ordinary brick to be ordered around by those privileged young masters, a bunch of mediocre incompetents who could still strut over me. I was the top candidate in the palace examination, yet a decade of grueling study couldn't outweigh a single compliment from someone else's grandfather. Why? By what right? I refused to accept it. This endless resentment, those born at the summit, lacking nothing, can afford to be passive and virtuous? Then look down and accuse me of being ruthless. I fear no one's condemnation. Yes, I am ruthless. I'll stop at nothing to climb step by step and trample them all beneath my feet. Lu Qingshi is such a man. He's not entirely without feeling. He did suffer when my mother and Lady Li left him, but those trivial emotions never hinder his path. He loves only himself, values only profit, burns with ambition, and charges forward without looking back. He looked at me beside him and laughed heartily. I, Lu Qingshi, am not one who cannot accept defeat. I am grateful that I did not lose to power and nobility, but was defeated by my own beloved daughter whom I hold in high regard. I was defeated by being outmaneuvered, not because of lowly status. He grabbed my mother's hand along with the blunt knife she held and decisively slit his own throat. Blood gushed out as Lu Qingshi gradually fell silent. Thus, a powerful minister of his generation faded into obscurity. My mother, still lost in the past and emotionally agitated, made no effort to conceal her loathing and hatred toward me. Frowning at me, she suddenly seized the teapot beside her and hurled it straight at my forehead. Gu Lu reacted swiftly and pulled me aside, but it was too sudden to fully dodge. At least I avoided my forehead's center. The teapot struck my brow, leaving a winding trail of blood. The bastard child he left behind. You shouldn't exist in this world. Why won't you die? You deserve to die too. My mother frantically hurled anything within reach at me, whatever she could grab, even that blood-stained knife without hesitation. Gu Lu shielded me as we dodged, and even his mother rushed over upon hearing the commotion, standing protectively in front of me, asking in disbelief, "Have you lost your mind? Isn't she your own flesh and blood?" She tried to persuade my mother, "A girl's face is delicate. Don't treat her like this. Atao is a good child. Her background wasn't something she could choose, and she clearly hasn't done anything wrong." She turned to comfort me, though I wasn't the least bit upset. I watched coldly as my mother threw her tantrum. Long ago, any natural affection I had for her had already worn away. Gu Lu once taught me to treat myself like my own little rabbit. Seeing myself as that rabbit, I suddenly understood my own pitiful state and the hatefulness of others. In the past, I would endure beatings and scoldings without even trying to avoid them, meekly serving as her punching bag. But now, I've long since broken the habit of trying to please others. The world often says that shallow familial ties mean neither side owes the other. Over 2 lifetimes, I helped her exact revenge with my own hands, cared for her in childhood, and ensured her wealth and peace in adulthood, even if born with original sin. between the debt of birth and upbringing. I owe her nothing but this one life. I calmly wiped the blood from my temple and bid her farewell gently. Mother, this is the last time I'll call you that. From now on, may we never meet again. She didn't realize how serious my words were. And as usual, hurled insults at me. Then leave, get out. I never want to see you again either. I walked away without looking back. Then I went to the prison, looked at the imprisoned Gujin, and handed him the poisoned wine I was holding. Your existence is a threat to him. To uproot the grass completely is the only way to find peace, I said to Gujin, once so carefree and unrestrained. Gujin now looked utterly defeated. He stared at me fixedly for a long time before letting out a mocking, bitter laugh. Coming here alone without even a single guard. If I wanted to act, I could easily take you hostage and escape. His eyes reddened again, but for once, no tears fell. His gaze still held unmistakable grievance and humility. Taking the poisoned wine, he lowered his head in desolation. Xiao Lu, you're just taking advantage of my feelings for you. Certain I won't resist. Just like every time I went to see you, you'd always summon Lu Xian. I knew all your little tricks. Yet I still let you succeed again and again, just like how I'd long noticed the people you'd hidden under the carriage. Yet I still covered for you. Gujin was merely a playboy, not a fool. In fact, he was quite clever, far more so than his mother. I had noticed this long ago, which is why I always kept an eye on him and remained wary, but he never seemed to harbor any ambition, nor did he agree with his mother's methods. He spent his days idling around, indulging in trivial pursuits. Living aimlessly, his mother, frustrated by his lack of drive, often lamented that he was hopeless and would never amount to anything. Gujin downed the poisoned wine in one gulp, rambling aimlessly as he awaited death. Empress, she was the empress from the very beginning, and her son was the crown prince since childhood. My mother always compared herself to her. Whatever empress she had, my mother wanted it all. But after all these years, my mother still hasn't become empress. And my father has never once mentioned making me the crown prince. My mother, resentful and unbalanced, always wanted to drag me into her schemes, to fight and snatch for more. But wasn't this kingdom originally won through Empress Xia's efforts, when she devoted her people and resources to assist His Majesty in the conquest? What right do we have to fight over it? As a child, everyone else had a father, except me. My imperial mother never knew. But the children outside always called me a bastard. After every fight with them, I'd return covered in wounds. Too afraid to go home, I asked for so little. I just wanted an ordinary father like other families had, a normal, warm home. His voice grew fainter as he collapsed to the ground. The palace held a simple funeral, and thus Gujin's life came to a hasty end. I selected a well-off family in the prosperous Jiangnan region. The elderly couple had lost their descendants in their later years and were grieving the lack of companionship and care. They were overjoyed to see Gujin and vowed to treat him as their own son. That poisoned wine wasn't meant to take lives, but to erase one's past memories. The current Gujin is the young master of a wealthy family in the misty Jiangnan region, born to elderly parents who dote on him in a warm and harmonious household. His family claims he lost his memory from a head injury, and he just rubs his head without giving it much thought. On my way back to the capital, I passed by Wei Qingyu on her tall horse. When Marquis Wuan helped the former emperor return to the capital, Wei Qingyu was also in the entourage and earned some merits, being appointed as a minor officer. Now she's heading back to the frontier with the troops, leaning against her father. She resembles a free-spirited bird ready to soar into vast, open skies. In my past life, Wei Qingyu was the person who stayed with me the longest. We grew old together until our hair turned silver, and died in the bright spring of March. In the blink of an eye, 5 years have passed, and in this lifetime, she has finally gotten her wish. I stood by the roadside watching her. On the broad, desolate avenue, I and a few attendants beside me stood out conspicuously, hard to miss. Wei Qingyu also looked over, our gazes meeting. Moments later, I stepped forward and pinned the only flower adorning my hair onto her saddle. Feeling the gift was too meager, I casually handed her the long sword I was holding as well. Wei Qingyu looked utterly astonished, then said with a mix of amusement and exasperation, "Miss, I'm also a woman. In this dynasty, social customs are liberal. When young women see a man they fancy on the street, they often give him their handkerchiefs, accessories, or at the very least, some fruits or pastries to express their admiration." Dressed in her dashing and androgynous attire, Wei Qingyu was so often mistaken for a young general that she'd grown accustomed to it. Having just left the capital, her horse was already laden with gifts from infatuated maidens. The fruits in her pockets alone could last her days. She probably assumed I was another love-struck girl mistaking her for a man. I smiled faintly at her. I know. Having said that, He offered no further explanation. Mounted his horse, and rode away without the slightest hesitation. Only after I had gone far did Wei Qingyu withdraw her gaze. Drawing the long sword in her hand, she saw it was none other than the imperial Shangfeng sword bestowed by the emperor, an exceedingly precious treasure, capable of ensuring a clan's prosperity for generations. In recent generations of emperors, only one person has been granted this significant honor, Chief Lu of the Imperial Hospital. The late emperor's most trusted official, who was widely rumored among court officials to be the sole candidate for empress to the soon-to-be enthroned new emperor. My identity speaks for itself. In this lifetime, I had no connection with Wei Qingyu. She would probably never understand why I casually gave her such an important thing after just a fleeting encounter. Upon returning to the capital, I saw the female members of the Lu family who had been imprisoned after their household was raided. Lu Xian escaped this fate by following her mother back to the Li family, but Lu Shirong was among them. I only recently learned that as a political bargaining chip, she was promised by Lu Qingshi to be a concubine for a powerful old man to pave his way. After the Lu family fell, the cowardly old man, fearing implication, sent Lu Shirong back overnight, leaving her to be imprisoned along with the other female family members. Soon after, she was to be made a courtesan. Originally, since she was already married, she shouldn't have been sent back. I don't particularly like the practice of punishing women by forcing them into government prostitution. Gu Lu knows this, which is why he's been arguing with those old ministers, gradually reforming the laws and customs. In the past, women in our dynasty weren't even allowed to read books or hold official positions. It was only through Empress Xie's persistent efforts that we now have this enlightened atmosphere. Of course, all that came later. Looking at the disheveled noblewomen crowded together in a single cell without any dignity, I pointed lightly toward Lu Shirong in the corner. Bring her out. I turned and walked out of that cold, dark place, waiting for the jailer to bring Lu Shirong out. A group of strangers immediately surrounded her, tearfully pulling at her clothes to express their concern. Lu Shirong looked startled, confused, then flustered as she glanced at them, before finally turning her gaze toward me. She didn't recognize me. The people around her were her birth mother's husband, and her half-siblings. After her birth mother was driven out of the Lu family, she married into a modest but hard-working and well-off household. I sent people to find them, and upon hearing news of their biological daughter, the couple traveled for over 10 days by donkey cart with their entire family from a distant place to take her back, a home filled with love. The belonging Lu Shirong had sought in vain for 2 lifetimes. As she was surrounded by their concerned inquiries, I stepped away. My attendant handed her a bundle of gold and silver treasures. When Lu Shirong came to her senses, she couldn't understand why a complete stranger would help her. She stumbled over, shouting, "Wait, hold on, hold on." I paid no heed and walked away without looking back. In the imperial palace, Gu Lu was trying on the newly embroidered dragon robe by the seamstresses. The entire palace was bustling with preparations for the coronation ceremony. As I made my way through the busy courtiers, before I could even get close, Gu Lu spotted me at first glance. The peerlessly handsome nobleman's eyes instantly curved into a gentle smile. He asked me with a smile how the robe I was wearing looked. The dragon robe prepared for the ceremony was intricate, grand, and exquisitely beautiful. But the 5-clawed golden dragon coiled upon it lacked eyes, a slight flaw in the fine jade, truly regrettable. It was rare for Gu Lu to ask anything of me. He wanted me to add eyes to this significant robe. I had almost forgotten myself. My embroidery skills were no less than those of the palace seamstresses. These hands of mine, whether holding acupuncture needles or embroidery needles, were equally deft and skilled. Of course I agreed, nodding my head. That very night, I prepared silk threads and got to work. Though it was just a pair of eyes, the task proved incredibly time-consuming. Gu Lu moved a desk nearby to handle his affairs while keeping me company. The candlelight flickered, creating a quiet and warm atmosphere. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my chest, so intense that the needle pricked my fingertip, and I fainted without warning. This wasn't the first time I'd collapsed from pain recently. My heart condition was flaring up more frequently and with greater intensity, causing me to lose consciousness several times. While previous episodes went unnoticed, this time I collapsed right in front of Gu Lu. When I woke up, Gu Lu's eyes were bloodshot from staying up, sitting by my bedside, tightly gripping my hand, futilely trying to warm my icy fingers. Seeing me awake, Gu Lu immediately hugged me, his voice muffled, "A Tao. I've always known you've been keeping many things from me. If you didn't want to talk about them, I wouldn't ask. If you didn't want others to know, I wouldn't pry, waiting for the day you'd tell me yourself. You could keep other things from me for a lifetime and it wouldn't matter. But you being sick, this is something I truly can't turn a blind eye to. All the things you've done and said these days are exactly like arranging posthumous affairs and leaving last words. How could this not make me panic? I suppressed the news about my heart condition from spreading, but Gulu noticed something was off. That's why he deliberately had me embroider eyes, keeping me confined in the palace for close observation. Unexpectedly, I suddenly fainted that very night. His eyes were filled with insecurity and concealed heartache, making me feel guilty. Gulu rarely shows his emotions. This version of him hardly seems like himself anymore. I calmly deceived him without changing expression. It's true I've been suffering from heart palpitations recently, but there's no need to worry. As the best physician myself, I know how to treat my condition. Just need gradual recuperation. Gulu lowered his gaze to look at our clasped hands, though it was unclear whether he believed me or not. From then on, he stayed by my side without leaving for a moment, personally attending to every meal and drink, feeling somewhat helpless. I finished embroidering those eyes and then attended Lu Xian's wedding. When news of Gu Jin's death spread, she cried uncontrollably, vowing to never marry and instead become a nun. Her mother decisively arranged for her to marry the young guard by her side as her husband. After the wedding, the couple was sent to live with a branch family in Jiangnan, where she could cool off under the rain. Lu Xian now appears much calmer, no longer looking utterly heartbroken, dressed in bright red. She radiates joy, but her expression changes abruptly upon seeing me. When no one was around, she finally asked, "Lu Tian, are you truly heartless?" I raised my eyes to look at her. "Gu Jin liked you so much. It was love at first sight. He's dead, and you show not the slightest reaction, even if it were just a dog that had been wagging its tail and begging for your affection all this time. Shouldn't you at least feel a moment of regret?" I remained unperturbed. "There's no such thing as love at first sight. He's no different from others, just infatuated with my appearance." Lu Xian grew even more indignant. "Perhaps he was initially drawn to your beauty, but later he genuinely grew to adore you. He'd mention it in front of me. He saw so many shining qualities in you. What he loved was you as a person, not just your face." "I have many shining qualities." I recalled long ago, that version of me who'd lived in the mountains for over a decade before being abruptly thrown into the imperial palace as a substitute consort, bearing another's identity. Without even a proper name, I stood lost and uneasy among noble ladies, unable to follow their conversations, utterly out of place. Then I was pushed forward, plotted against by my own father who sought to silence me forever. Just a little further back, I was a little beggar, filthy and scrawny. Lying on the street starving to death, everyone would cover their noses in disgust and avoid me. Some even vented their frustrations by kicking me. When I accidentally bumped into a noble's carriage, I numbly waited to be beaten to death and thrown into the mass graves outside the city to rot and breed maggots. But now, I'm proficient in rites, music, archery, arts, qin, zither, chess, calligraphy, painting, medicine, and needlework. I'm meticulous in thought, decisive in action, composed and dignified. I no longer need to hide my appearance and can protect myself, a person with inner peace and fulfillment, who doesn't need to grovel in love begging for scraps of affection from others. It seems there really are many shining qualities. My heart suddenly ached sharply, and tears fell abruptly. I suddenly wanted so badly to immediately hug Gulu. I looked at Lu Xian with a complicated gaze and said something she couldn't possibly understand. "You don't get it. The one he truly, deeply likes is Lu Tian, and what Gulu likes is a Tao. Whether it's the me covered in filth or the me shining brightly, whether it's the cruel and merciless him or the noble and virtuous him, the world adores Lu Tian, yet Gulu always calls me a Tao. Just as the old minister who taught me to write in my past life once lamented, whether it's Gu Jin, him, or countless others who professed their sincerity to me, had they met me earlier when I was still a little beggar or a girl in the mountains shivering in thin, tattered clothes in winter, they would never have noticed me. It was Gulu who saw me in the mud, and that's why I could be seen by them, by so many. I hurriedly left the Li residence and rushed to the imperial palace, wielding the emperor's exclusive token. I passed through layers of palace gates, barged into the grand hall of deliberation, and interrupted Gulu and the assembled ministers below. I've never been so willful before, yet no one blamed me. Gulu dismissed them without hesitation, and after the ministers took their leave, they warmly greeted me as they departed. I walked over and hugged Gulu without saying a word. He gently patted my back, comforting me like a child, and remained silent, not disturbing the quiet. A few days later, the coronation ceremony was held as scheduled. Gulu wore intricate black robes adorned with ferocious golden dragons whose piercing eyes were the finishing touch. As officials knelt in reverence, he stood tall and graceful atop the high platform. I remembered that day when I walked through the dim prison cells, seeing Gulu standing bathed in sunlight at the end, flawless jade, radiant and dazzling, glowing with iridescent splendor. A sudden wave of inexplicable emotion washed over him. In his previous life, Gulu ascended the throne in haste. In truth, few officials genuinely submitted to him then. Coupled with his patricide and fratricide, the courtiers secretly condemned him. A poor beginning inevitably led to a tragic end. Now it's different. His succession is fully legitimate. Officially, Princeton staged a coup, and the crown prince led the late emperor's counterattack. The late emperor died by rebel hands, while the crown prince crushed the rebellion, captured and executed Princeton, restoring order, a feat all should praise. This lifetime, Gulu returned to the capital years earlier, with ample time to consolidate and expand his power. He eliminated all threats like Lu Qingshi. Henceforth, the nation shall know stability and the realm tranquility. His mother, the brothers and attendants he grew up with, and all the people he cared about have returned to his life. His peerlessly handsome face was not gnawed into a ghoul by rats. The old injury on his leg received timely treatment and no longer aches unpredictably. His body, once ravaged by all sorts of random medications, is now healthy. The so-called miracle doctor got what he deserved. The countless scars left from his bloody journey back to the imperial capital and his past life no longer exist. He will no longer grow weary of humanity and himself after witnessing too much ugliness. Now, he still believes in the brightness and beauty of the world. Still firmly holds that those in power must work for the welfare of the people and take the well-being of all as their responsibility. A Gulu no longer riddled with scars. A very, very good him. Just like that white-clad youth standing beside the tall horse back then, as noble as orchids and jade trees, divine like a deity. Covering my mouth, I tried hard not to cry and quietly withdrew from the scene. Seizing the moment when no one noticed, I randomly picked a horse, left the palace, exited the capital, and galloped wildly without direction, clutching my chest in pain so severe I nearly fainted. I have a premonition that I'm about to die. This heart ailment has no cure. From the first day I was reborn, this pain began to appear. Every time I altered the pivotal moments of Gulu's fate, the agony became unbearably intense. The old monk once warned me, to defy fate and change destiny is to bear the karma for others. I roughly understand what it means. The heavens have their course, a life for a life. He tried to persuade me twice, but I didn't respond either time. He didn't know that my first reaction upon hearing this wasn't fear or retreat. I'm grateful that fate gave me a chance to defy destiny and bear Gulu's karma, but I don't want to die before his eyes. I'd rather perish in a place where no one can see me, at least that way. It wouldn't be so cruel. The pain was so intense that my vision darkened. In a moment of carelessness, both I and my horse tumbled down a small slope, rolling into thick snow, and I lost consciousness once again. Waking up this time was agonizingly difficult, as if an eternity had passed. Struggling to open my eyes, I saw Gulu carrying me on his back, trudging forward with great effort, each step uncertain. It seemed many days had already passed. Gulu looked utterly exhausted, fragile as if he might shatter. I never expected Gulu to find me. I didn't even know where I was myself. So many officials and soldiers were scattered in search, yet in the end, it was Gulu alone who found me. Just like long ago when we lived in the mountains, he could traverse towering peaks and endless valleys, step by step, from east to west, searching and searching until he finally found me, who had stayed out too late. His face and hands bore fine cuts from the reeds by the eastern shore, and his clothes were dotted with burrs from the western wilderness. Only he would never give up, so he always found me. But this time, I can't go back with him. The sky was filled with swirling snowflakes. If Gulu had memories from his past life, he would have known that this snowfall was the very same one from the moment of his death in that previous existence. The icy snowflakes seemed to drift across time itself, carrying with them an inescapable, haunting chill of déjà vu. I leaned close to Gulu's ear and whispered softly, "Gulu, put me down." Gulu stiffened, momentarily overcome with surprise and joy. The cold wind caught in his chest, sending him into a coughing fit before he could finally speak. "Atao, you're awake," said something meaningless, but refused to let me down, afraid I might play some trick again. He really understands me. I changed tactics. Helplessly tugging at his clothes, leaned in to plant a light kiss on his cheek, and in the moment he was stunned, the poisoned silver needle in my hand pierced his flesh. Gulu staggered 2 steps before collapsing to the ground with me. I forced a pill down his throat and returned the dagger from my sleeve to him, my voice choked with suppressed sobs. "I'm sorry, Gulu. I can't keep my promise to stay with you until we're 100. I lied to you. This is a memory-erasing drug. I tested the previous version on Gu Jin and stayed to observe its effects before making improvements. This current version will only make Gu Lu forget the person he loves most. Arbitrarily depriving someone of their memories is an act of supreme arrogance. I never intended to do this, but now, perhaps there's no better solution. Gu Lu couldn't move or speak, only his eyes remained mobile. He stared at me unblinkingly, his gaze filled with too many emotions I dared not examine closely. I stripped off my thicker garments to wrap around him, then walked into the vast whiteness amidst swirling snowflakes. Under his tender yet despairing gaze, that was the last time Gu Lu ever saw me. Some farewells were quietly predestined from the very moment of our meeting. From then on, Lu Tian vanished without a trace, nowhere to be found. There was no more Tao in this world. Extra Story 1. What was the purpose of returning to the past? Perhaps it's about defying fate and making up for regrets. In the end, Wei Qingyu took her sweet pastries to the frontier. Lu Xian no longer missed her little guard. 15 witnessed his master's resurgence. Empress Shi lived to see her royal child. Lady Li left her hypocritical husband who had hurt her. Lu Shirong returned to her birth mother who would not neglect her. Gu Jinxing lived in a home with both parents. Atao's mother personally avenged her deep-seated hatred. Even Lu Qingshi and consort's son briefly had their wishes fulfilled. When Lu Qingshi ultimately took his own life, it could even be said he died without regrets. So what was Atao's regret? Was it that large, fragrant steamed bun hiding gold fragments, too precious to eat, burning red against her chest, with no chance to express her gratitude? Still that small segment of finger bone, like a tiny period at the end, concluding the tyrant's magnificent life story. Was it too late to save him from the abyss? Whatever it was, all wishes have been fulfilled. Everyone got what they wished for, yet all imperfections have been so perfectly resolved. But why does it still hurt? Extra 2. Many years later, when the ministers of Qi state entered the palace for discussions, they would often see their emperor occasionally casting a habitual glance toward the corner, then pausing in a daze, looking lost and bewildered. Each time, his eyes met only emptiness. Even he himself couldn't clearly explain what exactly he was hoping to see. It seemed he had forgotten some very important person and matter. A piece of memory was missing, making life always feel incomplete. Gu Lu rolled up his sleeve, revealing a character carved with a knife on his left arm, the faint scar of the character Tao. Many years ago when he was found in the icy wilderness, his body was covered in blood. Clutching a dagger in his right hand, he couldn't remember what had happened. But one thing was certain, those were characters he had carved into his own flesh stroke by stroke in his desperate struggle. Tao, he couldn't recall anyone around him whose name contained this character. He once casually inquired about it as if by accident, but his subordinates all claimed not to know who it referred to, mentioning only that he used to interact frequently with a girl named Lu Tian. Who was this Lu Tian? He could sense that his missing memories were related to her. But why were there two people? He couldn't figure it out again. Perhaps it's human nature to seek advantage and avoid harm, to escape pain. For many years, he had restrained himself from probing too deeply, muddling through life in a daze, until the ministers below began uniting again to admonish him, urging him to hold a grand selection of concubines and establish an empress. Gu Lu sat on the high dragon throne, his expression inscrutable. The excessive silence made the ministers below grow nervous, leaving them trembling with fear and beginning to regret their memorial. Only then did the emperor above leisurely utter a sentence. Then, present me with the list of suitable candidates you deem appropriate. The minister of revenue knelt in pleasant surprise and accepted the order. Days later, they eagerly submitted the list. Gu Lu glanced at it, half-lowered his eyelids, and unhurriedly arranged marriages for each maiden listed. All were well-matched with good families, excellent marriages, yet some ministers gradually grew pale. Probably a few days ago, these people visited each other and stuffed many carefully selected daughters from their own families, both legitimate and illegitimate, intending to send them into the palace to achieve great ambitions. With all their long-cultivated bargaining chips married off, these people had no choice but to give up their efforts to urge the emperor to take concubines. A simple move that solved the problem once and for all. Gu Lu swept his gaze over the ministers with a faint smile. Don't stretch your hands too far into matters that aren't your concern. That night, Gu Lu took out the dagger again, toyed with it for a long time, and suddenly realized he might never be willing to take concubines or marry an empress in this lifetime. Just thinking about those imperial harems makes me feel extremely agitated. He remembered this dagger. It was one of the items from a large chest of birthday gifts his mother had sent one year. It was supposed to be inlaid with the world's brightest gemstones, dazzling in their multicolored splendor, but at some unknown time, it had become bare and plain. Though the blade itself remained sleek and black, exuding its own kind of sharp, domineering aura. That night, Gulu had a dream. He dreamed of traveling south to provide disaster relief. Rushing through the streets to reach the disaster area, his carriage was moving at breakneck speed when it hit a beggar. The driver, who had been hired temporarily, was quite arrogant about being chosen for this task and began cursing at the little beggar, even raising his whip to strike her. The little beggar huddled pitifully, looking utterly wretched. As the crown prince, Gulu had witnessed far too many instances of people trampling on the weak while currying favor with the powerful. Only those stuck in mediocrity seek vanity by bullying the weak. True elites are generally gentle and tolerant when their interests aren't threatened. The ingrained upbringing from childhood compelled Gulu to stop the coachman. He stepped out and casually gave her some food and money. That should have been the end of it. The noble crown prince and a street beggar were never meant to cross paths again. The little beggar looked up, clumsily feigning pitifulness as he begged for help. There was still a hint of fear, a sense of helplessness. Those peach blossom eyes resembled the radiant sunlight shimmering on rippling spring water, refracting colorful brilliance. His heart seemed struck by that soft, harmless radiance. Gulu had encountered all sorts of people since childhood, able to see through even the most cunning old foxes in the imperial court at a glance. This young girl wasn't bad by nature, clever, with some petty schemes, but her attempts were clumsy and unpolished, not at all annoying but rather endearing. It was just a small effort. He didn't have time to linger, so he assigned 15 to handle the matter. Later, 15 rummaged through a pile of unused weapons, picking and choosing until he selected the sharpest blade, removed its gaudy decorations, and gave it to the young girl. He played along, pretending not to know. The dagger was once inlaid with the brightest gemstone in the world, and ever since, whenever he thought of the little girl he first met, he would remember her eyes. The little girl's eyes were clear and beautiful, so radiant that they outshone even the most splendid colored stones. Upon waking, the dream shattered, as if only a moment had passed, and he could no longer recall what he had dreamed. Yet the lingering loud heartbeat took a long time to calm. Gulu strode out of the bedchamber, exited the palace gates, left the capital city, and went to a secluded training ground where he found 15 instructing new recruits. In the end, he could no longer restrain himself from seeking answers. He asked 15, who is Ateo, and who is Lu Tian? Having served by his side for so many years, 15 would surely know things that others didn't. Sherwu paused for a moment and answered honestly, Ateo is Lu Tian. That's the name she uses when traveling outside. When your majesty was exiled to Luoqing, you met Miss Ateo. By the time this subordinate reunited with you, you two were already well acquainted. The specifics are unclear to me. Later, she followed you to the capital, saved Lady Yi, secured a position as imperial physician by the late emperor's side, assisted you in the succession struggle, and then disappeared after your ascension to the throne. Sherwu had already begun taking apprentices. The young disciples peeked out with curious faces from the corner, observing this rarely seen emperor, their future sovereign to whom they would pledge loyalty. In their jostling, the group tumbled into a heap, interrupting Sherwu's words. With a dark expression, Sherwu strode over and kicked each one. The half-grown youths, still lacking composure, yelped and groaned in commotion, clutching their bottoms as they scrambled out to kneel in a row and beg for punishment. Of course, Gulu wouldn't bother arguing with a bunch of children. Having gotten the answer he wanted, he left for another place. His mother refused to return to the imperial palace, choosing instead to live in a quiet little house with another madwoman. He had never paid attention to this madwoman before. His mother forbade him from interacting with her, so Gulu never gave it much thought. Now he knew. This madwoman was Atao's mother. His mother was originally someone who loved traveling far and wide. Unable to stay put even in the palace, later, after being confined to the estate for so long, she became reluctant to go out, spending her days practicing calligraphy and daydreaming in the little house. Just like that, a day would pass. He asked the queen mother if she still remembered Lu Tian. The brush in her hand paused, making a stray stroke that ruined the entire calligraphy. She crumpled the paper and threw it away, saying, "She was a clever girl. Together, you rescued me from that person." Holding the key given by the queen mother, Gulu opened the gate to the western courtyard of the small residence and saw the madwoman whom everyone avoided. The queen mother told him this person had suddenly gone mad on a quiet morning, after Lu Tian went missing. Everyone spread rumors that she must have died in some unfindable place. When the news finally reached her mother's ears several beats too late, this biological mother who had never cared for her daughter suddenly went mad. She refused to believe it, muttering distractedly to herself, "Dead, how could it be? How could it be? Impossible, it's impossible. She didn't even realize she was crying, her expression dazed. Someone like her, how could she die? I pushed her into the river, abandoned her in wolf-infested mountains, smashed her head with stones, starved her, tried to kill her again and again, yet she grew up just fine. That wretched life of hers was so tenacious, how could she die, muttering to herself. Perhaps recalling too many past events, or perhaps feeling belated heartache and remorse, remembering how she, as a mother, had whipped with bamboo strips, scratched with nails, pulled her own daughter's hair, never treating little Ateo with kindness. The woman burst into loud sobs on the spot. From then on, the town gained a madwoman. She would constantly steal other people's children, humming gentle lullabies to soothe them. Whenever she saw children being scolded or beaten, she'd rush over like a mad beast to protect them, biting and cursing their parents. She'd carry stones to children she met on the street, urging them to smash her to death, or stand by rivers and lakes, begging kids to push her in to drown. This left local families in constant panic, too terrified to take their children outside for fear of encountering that lunatic. Madame Yi, fearing she might cause trouble, locked her up in the west garden. When Gulu pushed open the door, the place was already overgrown with weeds. The madwoman cradled an empty cloth bundle, rocking back and forth while singing nursery rhymes with a smile, only to suddenly break down in tears. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have left a newborn baby on the ground all night, a whole night. How cold it must have been. If Atao were to see this scene, one wonders what she would think. I arrive when spring is absent. I leave when spring fills the garden. Gulu traveled incognito to the rainy Jiangnan region. The young master of the Lu family, Lu Jin, was a notorious playboy in the city, but his handsome appearance made up for it. As he galloped through the streets with his entourage, the courtesans in the brothels leaned out of windows, waving handkerchiefs and calling out excitedly, while the young wives on the streets blushed and stole glances. Then the crowd noticed Gulu standing apart from them after the horses had passed. And a sudden hush fell. His beauty was so striking that no one dared make a sound to disturb the moment. The jade-like gentleman in white robes locked eyes with the young master of the Lu family through the misty drizzle. Gulu merely glanced at him before turning to leave. Behind him, Lu Jin didn't understand what was happening, but suddenly felt an inexplicable and peculiar sensation wash over him, a dizzying confusion between dream and reality. Just as he was about to chase after and stop that person, old Master Lu intercepted him. The old man jabbed his cane at him angrily and dragged him back to apologize, because he had rejected yet another girl chosen by Madame Lu. Over the years, he had driven away countless young ladies, and soon he'd probably be blacklisted by all the matchmakers in town. He didn't study properly, couldn't be bothered to learn how to manage account books, and spent his days idling around with a bunch of good-for-nothing friends. The old man forced him to go home and placate the old madam. Though Lu Jin was usually unruly, he was obedient and docile in front of his parents. He followed meekly, but before leaving, he glanced once more in the direction of that man, who had long since disappeared. Lu Jin felt an inexplicable sense of loss. Gulu knew this was his half-brother from the same father, someone who should have been eliminated, but in the past, he had tacitly allowed Ateo to keep him. What kind of girl could make him so indulgent? Gulu was handling affairs in Jiangnan and even met Lu Xian and Lady Li. Lu Xian and her husband walked down the street, with a young child of a few years old following at their feet. Madame Li bought a sugar figurine to amuse her little grandson, creating a heartwarming scene from afar. The once spoiled young lady now appeared much more composed and gentle, no longer resisting the marriage arranged by her mother. Her eyes were filled with love when she looked at her husband, and she had come to realize how immature she had been in her youth, thinking she was in love with Gu Jin, chasing after him every day, and frequently throwing jealous tantrums at Lu Tian, which was truly childish. But Lu Xian had never truly disliked Lu Tian, though every time she picked a fight with him, he could effortlessly infuriate her to the point of explosion. She couldn't help it. Lu Tian was just too good-looking. After a night's sleep, the mere thought of his face would make her anger dissipate on its own. Speaking of which, though she had grown accustomed to a life as calm as still water, she occasionally still missed her youthful days in the capital. Gulu lowered his eyes to sip tea in the attic, while the group of people below passed by without noticing him, chatting and laughing as they walked away under the lantern lights. After handling trivial matters, Gulu was in no hurry to return to the palace. He took some free time to travel north beyond the frontier, where he encountered a few commoners carrying gifts of dried meat to a private school. The name of the schoolteacher made him pause for a moment. It was Lu Shiron. Her maternal home was nearby, and her younger siblings had already started families, but she had little desire to marry. From a young age, she had shown exceptional talent, so she opened a private school to teach. Her family didn't object and even helped promote her school to attract students. Now, she was a well-known teacher in the region. Gulu did not linger. Traveling all the way north to the frontier, the wind and sand whipped withered grass against their faces as Marquis Wuan and his daughter came out several miles early to welcome the emperor. Wei Qingyu had grown darker and stronger, grinning to reveal a set of white teeth, her untamed appearance utterly unlike the delicate, frail beauty of Lu Tian. Indeed, they had only ever crossed paths once, yet that single encounter left such a deep impression on Wei Qingyu that she might never forget it, even though it had been just an ordinary outing. A plainly dressed beauty in green stood by the roadside, followed by imperial guards, making her status unfathomable. No noble lady would ride alone, nor would a guard captain wear such flowing robes. Moreover, the girl was breathtakingly beautiful, her presence transcending the mundane. Later, when she learned the girl's identity, everything suddenly made perfect sense. Imperial physicians were originally inconspicuous officials, never heard of one causing any waves, yet with this girl, the late emperor almost obeyed her every word, even personally bestowing upon her the Shangfang sword. It was said the two princes in the palace also fancied her, so whichever ascended the throne later would most likely make her the empress. Those who could serve as officials in the capital were all shrewd. The fact that this girl could command a crowd of such people proved she was far from the fragile, harmless appearance she presented, yet she casually handed the imperial sword to him, and later, it was said she vanished right after the new emperor's coronation, never becoming anyone's empress in the end. To this day, Wei Qingyu still doesn't understand why did all this happen, nor does she understand why the exalted son of heaven would travel so far just to ask her about that girl he'd only met once. Gulu couldn't quite explain why, nor what exactly he was doing. Like a believer abandoned by the gods, he wandered aimlessly, chasing after the remnants of divine miracles from bygone days, or like a madman in love with someone already gone, pitifully collecting fragments of others' words to piece together a complete image of her. Before she left, she erased his memories, thinking this would allow him to start a beautiful new life without burdens. Never expected that even after starting over and remembering nothing, Gulu would still fall for her again, time and time again. Love is instinct. First it was guiding her growth, then supporting each other, and now it's pure instinct. Everyone is rushing towards a better future for themselves, only he remains, as if abandoned in time, still stuck in the past, unable to move on. The seasons change year after year, and age increases year after year. In the blink of an eye, more than a decade has passed. Gulu grew increasingly handsome and profound, yet the imperial harem remained empty. Countless young women vied desperately to enter the palace, but he showed no interest. The elder ministers repeatedly petitioned, worried that the emperor would have no heir. Gulu wasn't completely dismissive of all opinions. He listened to those that made sense, so he selected a group of children from the imperial clan, raised them for a few years, and the most outstanding among them was a little girl. Gulu ennobled her as a princess, and she would become the dynasty's heir. With that, the old ministers no longer voiced objections and devoted themselves wholeheartedly to nurturing the young royal heir. When Gulu reviewed the little princess's studies, she excelled in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Several tutors proudly praised her. The eunuch beside Gulu, observing his expression, tried to gauge his thoughts and said, "Her Highness bears some resemblance to Lord Lu from back in the day," yet Gulu's expression remained unreadable. Giving nothing away, the eunuch realized he might have misjudged his flattery and broke into a cold sweat. Before he could think of a way to recover, he heard His Majesty murmur softly, "Not alike. No one resembles her, nor does she resemble anyone else. She is a one-of-a-kind existence. Every person in this world is unique, and Ateo is the only one he can see at a glance." Gulu suffered from memory loss. Had he remembered, he would have recalled that the day he saw his mother again was orchestrated by Ateo, who faked her death to bring her back. After his mother rested, he turned around to see the young girl sitting on a small arched bridge, washing away the yellowish-brown makeup from her face with clear water, revealing an immaculate beauty. She dangled her fair, delicate feet, teasing the fish in the water, and upon noticing his gaze, she lifted her eyes and flashed him a radiant smile. He remembered the day he nominally returned to the capital, when the palace hosted a grand banquet. While he dealt with verbal sparring at the forefront, his little girl stood in an inconspicuous corner, a dimly lit spot, with palace attendants bustling around her. Her presence went unnoticed by others, but Gulu spotted her in the crowd at a single glance. She was the girl he could always pick out first in any crowd. He occasionally has some very strange dreams. Although he can't remember the general content upon waking up, he can sense that those were not things that actually happened. For example, he dreamed of being a bloodthirsty and tyrannical monarch who almost lost control and strangled Ateo, only to snap awake the moment she stabbed a knife through his palm. He felt deeply remorseful. At that time, he didn't seem very familiar with Ateo yet, but she was different after all. He was weary of everyone, including himself, except for that little girl, who was like a clear pool of water he couldn't bear to disturb. He dreamed that Ateo kept a rabbit, an ugly one, but she treasured it dearly. Later, the rabbit was bitten to death by a dog, and the little girl was on the verge of tears, looking utterly wronged, yet stubbornly refused to let them fall. It wasn't that she lacked tears, they were her weapon. Fake crying came with instant tears, but when she truly wanted to cry, she'd grown accustomed to holding them back fiercely, as if feigning strength could shield her from harm. That mother of hers didn't raise her well at all, too afraid to even cry, probably because crying from as a child only ever earned her scolding. He must have been a bad person back then, yet his heart was unbearably tender. He couldn't help thinking about her. Seeing her wronged and dejected always made him feel an itch in his heart. Later, step by step, he helped her grow and become strong. Whenever she doubted or denied herself, he would solemnly tell her, "You're wonderful." In the end, he truly raised the young girl well. Later, he gradually understood what she meant to him. In his youthful arrogance, he carelessly let a glimmer of light fall upon her. As fate would have it, he became a villain who strayed from the path, harboring only malice toward the world and sensing only malice in return. Yet, Ateo remained his sole remnant of kindness left in this world. It was the embodiment of kindness in his heart. On the surface, it appeared he was the one constantly saving Ateo, yet in a way, she was also his redemption, the unrestrained refuge for his displaced former self. After waking up, Gulu still couldn't recall his dream, yet inexplicably had people bring him many rabbits to raise. But after some time, he found them dull and uninteresting. He always felt unsettled inside, an emptiness that couldn't be filled, a sense of loss and melancholy. Long afterwards, he woke up startled in the middle of the night, unable to explain his own thoughts. He wandered with a lantern to the cluster of rabbit cages and opened them all one by one, setting every rabbit free. His heart felt heavy, unbearably so. He murmured, "These aren't my little rabbits." Time flies swiftly. In Gulu's bedchamber, among the many places storing important secrets, there also lies an aged prayer lantern. The inscription quietly rests on its yellowed shade, "May you live 100 years. With peace in every season." Gulu could no longer remember his exact age. The little princess who once stood only half his height had grown up, even beginning to show fine wrinkles. He often heard his close ministers lament through tears that the princess was perfect in every way, except her face had lost its charm. Gulu found it irrelevant. Intelligence sufficed. He kept a pond of beautiful little fish of unknown origin. Their numbers grew until they filled palace ponds everywhere. Overwhelmed, Gulu decided to release them into the mountain streams. Upon arrival, he learned the elderly abbot of a nearby temple was nearing his final moments. Summoned there, Gulu met the white-bearded monk, aged beyond speech. The old man gazed at him with ancient compassion in his eyes. He said, "By the stream in the back mountain, there's an old horse. A young girl once entrusted it to this old monk. In the blink of an eye, so many years have passed." After uttering these words, the old monk quietly closed his eyes. Gulu stepped forward to check. He had already stopped breathing, and the young monks wept uncontrollably. Gulu walked to the stream in the back mountain. The stone platform where the old monk used to sit fishing every day was now covered in moss and overgrown with weeds. After releasing the small fish that could no longer be kept, Gulu spotted the aged white horse nearby. He planned to lead the old horse back to the palace, where professional grooms would care for it until its natural end. But as soon as they stepped beyond the temple gates, the old horse seemed to sense something, tears streaming from its eyes. Since it was a foal, this horse had followed the old monk across mountains, rivers, and lakes, witnessing the warmth and coldness of the world. The man and the horse were like old friends who had accompanied each other for years. After the old monk passed away, the once healthy horse suddenly fell ill and died on an ordinary night. One wonders if, before its death, it could recall the carefree days of its youth, galloping through spring-flowered mountains, with its former owner weaving flower crowns for its head and taking it along to bother the old abbot who was fishing. Those irretrievable childhood days. In her old age, Gulu's mother often chatted through the window in the wall with the madwoman confined in the western courtyard. Though the latter might not understand, her childhood friends had either married far away or passed on, leaving no one else to listen to her. The madwoman, too, had grown white hair and was no longer wildly uncontrollable. She spent her days watching the sun rise and set, her expression vacant, only asking those who passed by her window, "Have you seen my Atao?" No one paid her any attention. Later, the madwoman died on a cold snowy night, collapsing by the bedside as if struggling to crawl toward a corner. Perhaps in her final moments, she hallucinated and thought of when her daughter was first born, left on the floor in a corner for an entire night. After the madwoman's death, Lady Yi suddenly felt lonely and rarely spoke again. A few more years passed, and she passed away peacefully without illness or pain. Gu Lu, burdened with a heavy heart, arranged a grand funeral for her, a lavish and dignified burial. Officials from various regions came to the capital to attend. Many of the old ministers had long passed away, and the court was filled with many unfamiliar faces. Gu Lu spotted someone whose features seemed vaguely familiar. Upon inquiry, it turned out to be the youngest son of Lu Xian, who had just been promoted. Gu Lu asked him about his parents and family. The young court official, overwhelmed by the honor, knelt down. "My grandmother has long since passed away. My mother and father are in Linen taking care of their grandchildren. My mother hasn't mentioned the past in a very long time." Gu Lu dismissed him. During the palace banquet, he saw Wei Qingyu again. Decades had passed since their last meeting. The Marquis of Wuan had long since died, and Wei Qingyu had inherited his title. She had been stationed at the military camp year-round and was now a dignified, robust female general. Accompanied by a few handsome young men and her still young son, everyone was moving forward with time. Only Gu Lu remained in the winter of the first year of Qing'an. The swirling snowstorm blanketed his entire life. Later, Wei Qingyu died in a battle, and descendants placed many overly sweet pastries before her grave. Lu Shirong became the renowned lay Buddhist Shirong, mentoring 3,000 disciples. The new top scholar in the imperial examinations was her student. After the old master's death, Lu Jin suddenly matured, proactively learning commerce and account books to sustain the Lu family business. Traveling extensively across the land, 15's-old injuries flared up, confining him to bed for daily recuperation. Later still, these people all passed away one after another. Gu Lu didn't know if he lived to 100, his memory had declined. Contemporaries gradually vanished from his life. Palace scenes changed repeatedly until they became unfamiliar, as did the people, all unrecognizable young faces. The personal guard by his side was an unfamiliar face. Gu Lu scrutinized him for a long time before recalling this must be the disciple trained by Shiwu, one of those little radish heads who used to crowd by the door peeking in, tumbling over each other. Now he already looked middle-aged, but the guard said, "Master, Lord Shiwu was this subordinate's grandmaster." Gu Lu froze. Truthfully, he could no longer remember many things, and the faces of numerous people had faded from memory. He only vaguely recalled a dream he'd once had in some forgotten year and month, vaguely remembering the bustling market, horse carriages, and a pair of beautiful, clear eyes. Before Gu Lu died, a crowd surrounded him. Most were unrecognizable juniors. His last words carried endless regret. "To this day, I still long to dream of her," unaware of whom he meant. Someone softly asked, "Dream of whom?" Gu Lu fell silent. The people by the side waited for a long time, their hands trembling as they reached forward, only to discover that His Majesty had already ceased breathing at some unknown moment. The heavy snowfall in the winter of the first year of Qing'an buried too many joys and sorrows, partings and reunions. Gu Lu would never know that in that winter, a Tao walked through the snow, leaving behind a few sparse lines of words that traversed past lives and the present. The moon was meant to hang high above the layered clouds. I once struggled in the mud and caught a glimpse of the moon. Its light was not meant for me, yet it truly shone upon me. With filthy water, I cupped a handful of shimmering fragmented moonlight. Later, the moon fell. I watched it sink into the mud, losing its radiance, yet it still struggled to fly back into the sky. Then, mid-air, it suddenly shattered into pieces. After that, I had the chance to carefully lift the moon, devoting all my life's effort, step by step, to carry it back into the heavens. High in the vast firmament, the sun keeps it company, the stars keep it company, and the rosy clouds keep it company. Farewell, my moon. Neither in their past life nor this one did they ever seem to say "I like you" to each other. In her previous life, Atao developed the habit of writing letters to Gu Lu filled with her random thoughts. Now these monologue-like letters, destined to never be sent, were instead written in the snow. With each gust of wind and flutter of snow, the words were erased, ensuring no one would ever see them. She felt there was nowhere to go, so she went to the temple to find the old monk, hoping to travel the mountains and rivers with him. But upon arriving, she discovered the old man had already set off, his whereabouts unknown. She thought of many places, then suddenly longed for home, the distant city of Luo, that remote house nestled deep in the mountains. Many years ago, she left that remote mountain village, weathered the storms of 2 lifetimes, visited countless places, witnessed the world's towering peaks and vast seas, experienced the pinnacle of extravagance and splendor, yet, at death's door, all she desired was to return to that small, unassuming corner, neither grand nor luxurious. There, once lived a little version of herself. At life's end, she walked on, approaching that dilapidated thatched cottage 1,000 miles away. Her body grew weaker by the day. In her past life, she had saved many people, yet failed to save Gulu. In this life, she saved many again, but couldn't save herself. She remembered the day she left the thatched cottage in her previous life. She had saved for ages to buy a package of rice cakes, eagerly presenting them to her mother, only to be suddenly forced to leave home. The cakes were thrown to the ground, trampled upon without a second thought. Last time after I killed the prefect's son, I casually took the golden pichot he was wearing, but didn't loot all his valuables. This made the prefect suspect it was a murder for robbery, yet he lacked evidence, so he had the golden ornament sketched and posted bounty notices at the city gates, offering rewards for information. Later, and in this lifetime, she left the thatched cottage walking alongside Gulu. Atao remembered that day when she injured her foot and was stranded in the mountains. Gulu found her and carried her home on his back. That night, the bright moonlight bathed the world in its glow, and scattered fireflies followed at their feet as she drowsed peacefully on Gulu's back. She trekked over mountains and rivers, only to collapse just steps away from that collapsed, dilapidated thatched cottage, so close, yet she never made it back before death took her. Later, a kind passerby buried her in the abandoned courtyard and planted a pear tree that would bloom profusely every spring. In her life, winter always seemed to dominate too much time, yet every meeting and parting happened in spring. She was a little beggar when she first met Gulu in spring. In her past life, she was pushed and fell toward him in the palace during spring, and in this life, when she picked Gulu up from the ruined temple, it was spring again. Now winter has passed and spring has come again. When she died, she left nothing behind, like an old wild grass that perished in the spring breeze of the new year, leaving no trace. In that distant yet close collapsed old house, with her last glance before death, she seemed to see a tiny version of herself, that was her at just 5 years old. Named Atao, it happened to be the Mid-Autumn festival that day, and her aunt gave her a mooncake. She only broke off a small piece and placed the rest by her mother's bedside. Holding that small piece of mooncake, she broke off another large portion and offered it to the moon in the sky. Children are full of imagination. She was a very lonely child who wanted to befriend the moon, and she already had a name. So she offered mooncakes to the moon and greeted it. She said, "Hello, moon. My name is Atao." Later she said, "Goodbye, my moon." The full end.